What's up guys, Chaos Shinobi here. This is What If Naruto Had Dark Mangekyou. Summary: Naruto decides he will no longer tolerate the village's hate, so he decides to send it back tenfold, and through his hatred the Dark Sharingan is born. Chapter 1. In a dark, dimly lit room somewhere below the ground, an old man sat behind his mahogany desk, quite upright despite his apparent impairments. Half his face and his right arm were covered in bandages, but that to no extent diminished the poisoned sense of power that could be observed from his countenance. Before him stood a man wearing an eagle-shaped mask, garbed in Anbu armor from head to toe. The presence of the animal mask on his face concealed from the world his bland, emotionless visage, but his master knew. His master knew that any order his servant was given, he would obey and execute without question. He had trained him himself after all. Eagle. You will go to the red light district and find a group of civilians who have intoxicated themselves from the festival. You will play upon their hate and suspicion of the Jinchuriki. Given your Kekkei Genkai, it should be child's play. Weave your illusions such that it becomes the most overwhelming thought in their minds. Lead them to the boy, but beware. The boy must live, and remember. Is that clear? Hi, Dansu-sama. Make sure you are not discovered. In case you are, abandon the operation. Dismissed. 30. On a warm summer evening, a 10-year-old boy stared into the orange-streaked horizon, watching the sun set into the forest beyond, its shining radiance slowly fading into oblivion. Sitting atop a massive stone head carved into a mountain, he looked down into the village beneath him. The restaurants, the shops, the bakeries, they all reminded him of one fact: he was not wanted. He was hated by the village. Nobody needed or wanted him. He was alone, as he had been all his life, from the very day he was born. In the beginning, he tried. Oh, he tried so very hard, to gain the recognition of the villagers, to earn their respect as a fellow human being, if nothing else. But to no avail. Years ago, he had stopped trying. He had stopped crying too. It would do him no good. The more he tried to socialize with them, the more he was rebuked and rejected, called demon and monster. He hated them. He hated them all, and were it not for a few kind souls, he didn't know what he would do. One of them was an old man who would visit him from time to time, and help him buy stuff from stores that would throw him out. He was the Hokage, he realized a couple years ago, the strongest ninja in the village, someone everyone adored and revered. He wanted to be just like him when he was younger. But then, the academy happened. Even since he turned 9, the old man had entered him into the ninja academy, and his excitement knew no bounds. He finally had a chance to prove himself, to make others realize how great he could be, that he too could become an embodiment of the will of fire, as the old man put it, whatever that meant. However, it was not so long after that he realized the futility of his dreams. Whenever he succeeded at something the class was assigned, he would be scorned instead of praised. His assessments would be sabotaged, and he was failed on purpose. During sparring sessions, his teachers would fight at levels no kid his age could ever hope to match, and he would end up being beaten into unconsciousness, where he was dumped unceremoniously in the grounds, left to lie there till he woke up. However, despite these handicaps, he managed to just barely scrape by, and learned to harness his chakra. He learned about shuriken and kunai, and how to use them in a fight. He could shoot a bullseye from 10 feet away, which was pretty impressive in his books. He could use his chakra to hench himself into a perfect replica of almost anyone he knew. In fact, he had even created a technique of his own, where he transformed into a beautiful buxom blonde girl, almost completely naked if not for the technique's residual clouds covering her privates from the rest of the world. And it was quite the formidable jutsu indeed, for this technique was all you needed to bleed any pervert out there into submission, which he learned firsthand after a few trial runs. Countless souls who were caught in its deadly snare. It worked on the villagers who chased him around the village, shouting for revenge against the demon. It worked against his teachers, it even worked against the old man Hokage, and he was supposed to be the strongest ninja out there. He was not the best in his class, but neither was he the worst. In fact, he liked to think he was one of the better students, only being bested by the likes of Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno, Shino Aburame and others. That too was partly due to his teachers being completely biased against him, and partly due to his inability to perform the Bunshin no Jutsu, which was supposed to create an illusionary clone of the user, in order to confuse the enemy. But no matter how hard he tried, he could not create a single working clone that was not a devastating failure. In fact, he had already given up on that avenue, and come to terms with the idea that it was impossibility for him. Why, he had no idea. But he didn't really care, because he had something better. Flashback: Naruto fled the incoming mob as it stormed behind him, chasing him away from the shop he had painted orange overnight, running like his life depended on it, which it did, as a matter of fact. Seeing some bushes to his right, he leapt in, and hid, his head at ground level. Several minutes, he waited like that till he was certain he had lost them. He was almost about to emerge when he heard voices. He peeked out of the bush he was hiding in into the clearing behind it. It was a tall man, probably a jounin from the looks of it, with 3 kids, each wearing a Konoha Hittite over their foreheads. The shortest one, a boy with short brown hair and a puppy sitting on his head, was bouncing up and down in excitement. "What cool new jutsu are you gonna teach us today, sensei?" he asked. "I'm sure all of you are already acquainted with the clone jutsu from the academy. Now I'm gonna teach you a different type of clone, a solid clone in fact." Turning to the boy, who by the looks of it was an Inuzuka, he said, "Toshijai, since your dominant element is earth, you'll be learning the Tsuchi Bunshin no Jutsu. Same goes for you, Renji," he said to the taller boy. "Here are the hand seals, get to work. I expect you to be able to create at least 3 solid clones by the end of the week. And no slacking, Renji." Showing the two the correct sequence of hand seals, which was pretty short as far as Naruto was concerned, the jounin turned to the last member of the group, indicating for her to follow him towards the river. "Maki, you being a water element user, will be learning the Mizu Bunshin no Jutsu, and that's why I brought you here, since the river water will help you train and makes it easier to create water clones for beginners." Showing her the hand seals, and telling her to start practicing, he walked to do whatever jounin usually do. Naruto, who hadn't moved a muscle ever since he spotted the team enter the training field, finally relaxed as the jounin left the area. He had found himself a new target. Flashback end. Over the next few days, he had practiced and perfected the Earth Clone Jutsu, which he found, to his astonishment, to be far easier and more natural than the regular clone jutsu. By spying on the team again and again, he had even learned the Water Clone Jutsu, watching the girl Maki practicing on it. However, what astonished him most wasn't the ease with which these jutsu came to him, nor was it the fact that these clones were nowhere near as dull-looking and dead as his normal clones, rather it was the sheer number of clones he could make. Literally hundreds of clones appeared at his command, and Naruto could barely even feel the drain on his chakra reserves. It was tremendous. This mind-blowing discovery, though, remained undiscovered, because Naruto knew exactly what would happen if word spread that the demon could summon hundreds of clones to his side at any time. And so, life went on. Naruto sighed as he ran his hand through his spiky blonde hair, opening his eyes to reveal blue orbs the color of the sky. Today was his birthday, but he expected no more than what previous years had brought him: pain and suffering, and a genuine loathing for almost all things Konoha. He got up, and found himself sitting at Ichiraku Ramen 5 minutes later. After devouring over 10 bowls of his favorite miso ramen, I don't think stomach sizes actually differ by that much, but hey, Kishi's the boss, and leaving the bill on his ever-growing tab for the end of the month, the blonde headed home, passing through dark side streets to avoid detection by the villagers, who apparently went over the edge with their demon-killing tendencies on the day of his birthday, which also turned out to be a festival day, in commemoration of the defeat of the Kyuubi, the nine-tailed demon fox that attacked Konoha 10 years ago, exactly the day he was born, in fact. Now Naruto was far from stupid, and he immediately found it fishy when he put all these facts together. However, the most he could conclude was that he was resented for being born on the day of mourning, and as petty as the villagers were, believing in this wouldn't be too far a stretch of the imagination, and the Hokage was quite tight-lipped on the matter. So it was on one of these dark alleys that he was passing through when he heard a noise, a drunken voice: "Today's the day I avenge my comrades, you filthy demon. Die, die, die. You'll pay for your insolence." A weight suddenly fell upon Naruto's back, and he doubled over. Just as he was about to stand up and push the weight aside, he felt a piercing pain in his left shoulder, as if a knife had just been stabbed through it, and then wrenched out with no care for the target's life. Well, that sums it up nicely enough. As the blonde pushed him off, he knew he was bleeding, which was evident from the stains on the ground, but he didn't care. His body was pumping adrenaline and he ran, turning into an aisle and then another till he found himself trapped. With a dead end in front of him, and a drunken killer behind him, he had nowhere to go. However, Naruto was never one to go down without a fight, and the man before him was no more than a common civilian, though his overwhelming height and weight were quite the intimidating factor. Nevertheless, Naruto being Naruto went for a frontal assault, before being stabbed once more, this time through the stomach, and once more between his ribs. However, he did manage to uppercut the hulking figure, for him at least, in the chin and knock his feet out from beneath him, before ripping the man's kunai out of his hands and slitting his throat with it. Within seconds, there were 2 or 3 violent jerks, and then all was still. As the adrenaline left him, he grew tired and collapsed onto the man, falling unconscious. 30. Naruto awoke to the sound of birds chirping. Peace and quiet, Nothing to disturb nature but the sound of people bustling around, taking care of their day-to-day business. Wait a minute, where was he? As he opened his eyes, he was blinded by the dazzling light coming in from the window. He looked around, taking in the plain white walls and white bed sheets spread out on the bed he lay upon. Oh, he knew where he was, the bane of his short 10-year life, wherein resided the scariest and most cruel brand of professionals known to man, the Konoha Public Hospital. Giving himself a one-over, he realized something. He was bandaged all about his torso and shoulders, but he could feel no pain, no wound, nothing. So then why was he here? What day was it? The day of the festival. His birthday. And then it all came rushing back to him. How he was attacked by a drunken villager in the darkest of alleys in Konoha's red light district, how he fled from his assailant until he ran into a dead end, how had stood his ground, how he had so thoughtlessly slit the man's throat. He should feel ashamed of himself, he thought, but surprisingly, he didn't. After all, he was just defending himself. He hadn't actively sought out the man in order to kill him. Besides, he had deserved it. Before he could dwell further on this dark train of thoughts, the door opened up to reveal a young woman in a short nurse's outfit, leading the way for an old man wearing the ceremonial robes of the Hokage who entered in behind her. Though his face was set in an uncharacteristic frown, he allowed a slight shadow of a smile to creep into his expression before he resigned himself back to his previous demeanor. This was definitely not a social call. "Ah, I see you're up and about, Naruto-kun." Just as usual, he began, breaking him from his morbid train of thought. "How are you feeling now? My Anbu found you bleeding out from several puncture wounds on your body, lying over a dead man who was reported missing for 3 hours before you were found. What happened?" Though the old man already had a pretty good idea of what probably happened. "Oh hey, Gigi. I don't feel a thing. How long have I been asleep? And what date is it?" Naruto replied, actually sounding worried for a bit. "You were found late yesterday evening, and now it's the afternoon of the next day. What with the amount of blood you had lost, I'm actually quite surprised you were able to wake up so quickly. But putting those matters aside, we have some serious issues to discuss, primarily the case of the dead man you were found with." The Hokage began, trying to steer the conversation to the matter at hand. "Jigi, I was attacked by this unknown man, so I defended myself, and he ended up dying as a result. There's nothing I could have done." "But surely, you didn't have to kill him. Do you not know how big of a deal it is to take a life with your own 2 hands? This is a very grave deed indeed. How do you feel about it?" "I don't know what I feel. Or rather, I don't feel anything. If you're expecting sadness, or regret, or even remorse, I'm not sure I feel any of them. Aren't you happy that I'm alive? Would you prefer that I was dead instead?" "No, of course not, Naruto-kun, but you must understand that killing everyone who antagonizes you is not the solution. Make the people trust you, and there just may come a time when you are the most beloved person in the village. You have a responsibility to your village, Naruto. You cannot just go around killing its citizens." "But Gigi, I tried already, and nobody cared. Why does everyone hate me anyway? Is it because of the events at the time of my birth? Is it because of the Kyuubi?" These words, in the particular way and order they were said, though unknowingly, shocked the old man to his very core. Did Naruto know? If so, since when? He was baffled. How could he know, unless the Kyuubi was contacting him? "Do you know the answer, Naruto-kun? I want to hear it from you." Hiruzen Sarutobi, the professor, god of shinobi, and currently longest reigning Hokage sighed, as he lowered his head in defeat. Naruto knew. Would he ever trust him again? He didn't know. He would just have to come clean about the issue, and hope for the best. "How much do you know about that night 10 years ago, when the Kyuubi attacked the village?" "Well, at the academy, they taught us that the Ondaime Hokage defeated it, and killed it with an awesome suicidal jutsu." "Well, Naruto-kun, you see, the fact of the matter is that the Kyuubi cannot be destroyed, as it is merely a being of chakra, so there is no true and told way of killing it. The only option the Ondaime had was to seal it inside a newborn child. That child was you. That is also the reason why people see you as a demon, because they find you as a scapegoat for all of their hate that they hold against the Kyuubi." Seeing the blonde's gobsmacked expression, Hiruzen realized that he had been had. By a 10-year-old boy no less. He must truly be losing it in his old age if things were turning out this way. So Naruto had no clue whatsoever? That was just sad. On the inside, Naruto was smirking. Naruto, too, old man Hokage, 0 well, counting his use of the sexy jutsu that is. Anyway, he grew serious as he contemplated what he had just found out. But why did it have to be a child? Why me? Because only a child, whose chakra network was yet undeveloped, could hope to survive such a sealing. Had an adult been used, The sudden influx of so much chakra would have been too much, and the most probable scenario would be that the Kyuubi would escape, killing its host along with it. Is it harmful? The Kyuubi's presence, that is. No, actually, Jinchuriki, that's what people like you are called, actually have special abilities because of the being sealed inside of them. For example, look at the wounds you sustained just yesterday. It would have taken any normal person over a week to recover from them, and even then, they would probably have scarred, but with the help of your regenerative abilities granted to you by the Kyuubi, they're already fading away the next day. In addition, the Kyuubi's chakra slowly seeps into your coils, forcing them to become larger, and so, even at the age of 10, your chakra levels by far outclass those of most Chunin. So basically it makes me super badass. Yeah, how cool is that? Jiki, I want to be the strongest ninja ever. So I can make sure no one ever belittles me like that again. That is an admirable goal, Naruto-kun. To be a strong ninja to serve and protect one's village, and those precious to them. I'm expecting great things from you. A glimpse of a true smile could be seen on the old man's face, reflecting his pleasure at seeing Konoha's resident Jinchuriki setting himself on the path to becoming a true embodiment of the will of fire. As if those villagers can go themselves. Naruto thought, never once breaking the happy facade he had been displaying for the past half hour. But Gigi, how will I become an awesome ninja if my teachers don't teach me anything? I'm really sorry you feel that way, Naruto-kun. But there's always still the library. I'll make sure to let the librarian know that you're allowed in the ninja section. You know, Jinchuriki privileges and all. Hiruzen decided that endearing the young boy and making him feel indebted to him would make Naruto more loyal, and drive him to further improve his skill set more quickly. Thanks Gigi. I'll be sure to make you proud. Satisfied for now, the Sundaime Hokage stood up and made for the door, speaking to the nurse for a bit, and then finally bidding farewell, leaving Naruto to dwell on his thoughts. Gigi will never understand. The villagers' hate runs far too deep. There is no turning them. I will just have to fend for myself. And so began our favorite blonde's descent into darkness. It had been 10 months since Naruto became aware of the Kyuubi residing in his gut. It had been 10 months since the attack on his life, and much had changed since then. He was almost 11, and Naruto's third year at the academy was about to begin. Over the past months, he had improved much, mostly due to being able to freely visit the library. Of course, he was not allowed access to all the books there, especially those containing jutsu of the highest level, and most anything beyond Chunin level was only found in the Konoha archive, which had highly restricted access. Even then, between the amount of history texts available and those on chakra control and jutsu up to mid-B rank available, Naruto had come far from the boy he was 10 months ago. Not too long after the aforementioned episode, young Naruto had stumbled upon an unused training ground 3 to be exact, which he had unofficially declared as his. Every day, after returning from the academy, he would go there and work on his daijutsu, fighting with and against hordes of his Earth clones, which proved to be quite a workout, seeing that his Earth clones were almost as durable as he was, or maybe not, considering who we're talking about here, working through different strategies, all aimed at taking advantage of superior numbers to ensnare an opponent in his web of traps. Talking of traps, that was where Naruto excelled, his area of expertise, if you'd like to call it. But more precisely, trap making could be considered his hobby. After the dozens of times his apartment had been vandalized and intruded upon, the blonde had come to realize that his own well-being, and that of his small but comfortable apartment rested on his own shoulders, and he could not rely on the Anbu, who had better things to do, nor on the military police to properly patrol and safeguard his property from the random theft or other form of malicious intrusion. And thus began his interest in trap making. After the first half of a dozen attempts at entering his apartment were brought to their knees, some ending up with the intruders ensnared in coils of ninja wire, others falling into false floors, and some hanging from the ceiling, the frequency of such attempts decreased greatly. Aside from that, however, Naruto would practice several of the jutsu he had picked up from the books and scrolls in the library, including basic elemental jutsu. However, in his search for deadly jutsu, Naruto went through many a book on bloodlines and special jutsu, until he came upon something he had never expected to come across, namely, the Uzumaki clan. To say the blonde was shocked was an understatement. All his life, he had thought that he, being an orphan since the day he was born, had just been given a random name, which held no significance to anyone. He was a nobody, a clan-less, unimportant, random orphan, who nobody wanted and nobody needed. In other words, the perfect sacrifice. But now, he knew it not to be so. He had a clan, or at least, that's what it seemed like. He didn't know whether he ought to jump in delight, or wallow in despair. He had a family, even though he didn't know them yet. A family that had abandoned him, he realized. A family that had not claimed him in over 11 years, but then again, if he had never once heard of the Uzumaki clan, it may very well be that they were not even a clan of Konoha. Maybe his parents were migrants from some far-off land, and the other Uzumakis did not know about him. Yeah, that was probably it. That's why no one came for him. There was only one way to find out though. Flashback. An old man, well into his 60s, sat before a desk, battling against the pile of documents that lay innocently before him, passively hoping to overwhelm him. Well, sat would be slightly inaccurate, for he was resting his head on his pile of waiting paperwork, hoping to catch up on his much-deserved and well-earned reading time. After all, even kages have to rest sometimes, right? Wrong. The door to his office, and safe haven, dream on, yay, for the time being was blasted open, as a yellow blur sped into the room, coming to stop before his desk, being followed by his middle-aged secretary, who began to pull on the shoulder of the perpetrator behind this early morning chaos, who revealed himself to be none other than Naruto Uzumaki, Konoha's resident prankster as of a couple months ago. Get out of here, you insolent child. Hokage-sama doesn't have time to spare for every spoiled little kid who's lost his lollipop. Some people actually have work to do, unlike you. She chided, in a condescending tone. Let him be, Hamiko-chan. I was just finishing up with my work anyway. See? Hiruzen explained, pointing at his nearly empty desktop. Let her buy it, let her buy it. Hamiko stared unbelievingly, before spotting the pile of unstamped paperwork haphazardly tossed behind the Hokage's desk. Sweat dropping, she left the room, muttering something about the younger generation having no respect, and no consideration for etiquette when dealing with important people. Yes, Naruto-kun, how can I help you? I assume this isn't a social call, what with the enthusiasm you showed in getting here. Hiruzen began, reminding Naruto of why he had come here. Gigi, what can you tell me about my parents? Nobody knows who they were, they died during the Kyuubi attack. But you already know this. What exactly made you ask? Well then, how come I'm named after the Uzumaki clan? They were an important clan, right? Naruto-kun, I've told you this before, your name tag was discovered in your basket when you were retrieved from the hospital for the sealing ritual? But surely, there must have been someone named Uzumaki in the village before the Kyuubi attack? That's definitely a possibility. I was retired then, so I probably wouldn't know about all the active ninja at the time. But it's also possible that you're grasping for straws in the dark here and that you have no link to the Uzumaki clan at all. I'm sorry. Okay, then can you tell me about the Uzumaki clan? Where were they from? What were they known for? Can I meet them? Naruto-kun, I'm afraid that won't be possible. The Uzumaki clan was destroyed long ago during the Second Great Shinobi War, and any survivors or remnants were scattered to the four corners of the elemental nations. To be able to find or locate any one of them is not a simple task at all. And just like that, his heart dropped. All those hopes, wishes and aspirations he had been stacking, one upon the other over the past several hours since his discovery, came tumbling down, leaving him like a wilted stem. He sighed, resigning himself to his cruel fate, a fate that seemed intent on making him despair, playing the most insensitive of jokes it possibly could. Flashback end. Naruto being Naruto couldn't be kept down for long, and soon after, Naruto discovered what his clan had been known for. One of the more versatile, yet obscure arts, Fuuinjutsu. The art of sealing. The greatest living example of which could be found inscribed on his gut. Yes, he had noticed the giant and infinitely complex sealing array that would appear on his abdomen whenever he molded chakra. Aside from that, however, despite searching for everything there was to know about the clan, there wasn't too much information aside from guesswork and conjecture, such as the fact that Uzumaki clan members had a heightened vitality and very strong life force, and very short rejuvenation times. Well, yeah, he had loads of that. But didn't Gigi say that his healing was due to the Kyuubi's chakra? He wanted to hope, but the blonde was afraid of being let down. There was no concrete information about them with regards to any special abilities they possessed though. Just rumors of insane healing powers, rumors of out-of-the-world sensing abilities, rumors of visible weapons made out of chakra and whatnot. Regardless, Naruto was understandably less than satisfied. He decided that he would find out about his origins, and though he was loath to admit it, he craved for the sort of affection only a family could give. Flashback. Hey old man, keep the ramen coming. I'm starving. Exclaimed an exhausted young Naruto, stumbling into Ichiraku's little ramen stand after a full day of non-stop training with the great fireball jutsu. Ever since he saw his self-declared rival, Sasuke Uchiha, performing this technique in front of the entire class, and receiving extra credit for his end-of-term ninjutsu examination 2 months ago, Naruto had become obsessed with learning how to breathe out a fireball larger than himself from his mouth, and not long after his efforts bore fruit when he found a scroll detailing the jutsu in the shinobi section of the library, which, thanks to special permissions from the Hokage, he had access to. Over the course of a week, he had mastered it to the extent that he could exhale a fireball the size of his bathroom, small as it was, yet, he felt something wrong with it. As if when he would be about to perform the jutsu, something would hold him back, and he would feel that awkward empty feeling, even though the results of a successfully executed great fireball jutsu were obvious. Coming back to the ramen stand, where our favorite blonde is busy stuffing himself with the food of the gods, the aged owner of the ramen stand and his daughter, Ayame, smile as they look on. Tsuchiyoji-san, did you know about anyone else named Uzumaki who lived in Konoha before I was born? Naruto asked hopefully. Why yes, in fact. A young woman by the name of Kushina. Poor girl, she was. She came to Konoha a month before the destruction of the Uzumaki clan and the fall of Uzashiogakuer. She was quite a spirited young lady though, much like you yourself. Tucci stared on into the evening, reminiscing, thinking of times long gone. Sadly, she died during the Kyuubi attack. She was a frequent customer here at this ramen stand. So was Yondaime-sama in fact. Huh? Beat that you lousy usurpers. He jumped, punching the air for emphasis. Naruto's heart was jumping for joy upon hearing this. All of the facts fit together. Her dying during the Kyuubi attack, his inheriting her enthusiastic attitude. Wait a minute. Aren't you supposed to get your father's name when you're born? Let this not be a dead end please. Wasn't there a male Uzumaki, Tsuchijigi? Please say yes, please say yes. I'm afraid I haven't heard of any. Sorry Naruto-kun. However, there was another Uzumaki in Konoha, but she was far before your time. Who? Her name was Mito Uzumaki, and she was the Shodai-sama's wife. I don't really know that much about her. You should probably ask your academy teacher. He could help you out. This Kushina person, could you tell me more about her? Like what did she look like, and stuff, you know? He asked, daring to hope. Well, she had striking red hair and purple eyes, and she loved ramen almost as much as you do. She used to beat up anyone who made fun of her, especially her hair. Anyway, I don't really know as much about her as others. I remember she used to be pretty close to Hokage-sama, he would know. Maybe you should ask him. Then there's always Kakashi Hitake, if you can find him that is. So Gigi knew. Yet, he hid it from me. Why, is it because he doesn't trust me? Is it because of the Kyuubi? Well, I'm not going to ask him anyway. Deciding upon a new goal for himself, Naruto stood up, paying for the food from his allowance savings. Thanks a bunch, Oji-san. You were a real help. Could you tell me where to find this Kakashi person? Oh, just ask around, you'll find him sometime. Oh, alright. Well, see you. Flashback end. That was a week ago. He had no real luck so far with finding this Kakashi person. And since the academy was off, he didn't know where Iruka-sensei was. Heading to his normal training grounds, he heard voices. Loud voices. Shouting voices. And then he came upon a scene the likes of which he had never seen, nor had he ever conceived such an outlandish idea in his ever-imaginative little head. Lee, my youthful student. How lucky I was to have found you. I can just see the youthful potential lying dormant within you, awaiting the inevitably youthful awakening of its springtime of youth. A man in a tight body-fitting green spandex leotard with the thickest set of eyebrows known to man and black shiny hair in a bowl-cut style, wearing a Konoha gown and flak jacket and orange leg warmers shouted out to the world, hugging a mini clone of himself, the one he apparently called Lee. Yosh, Guy-sensei. It was I that was lucky to have been found by you and chosen by you to benefit from your youthful teachings. The mini clone of the newly revealed Guy-sensei shouted back, a river of tears flowing down his face, anime style. Where does all that fluid go anyway? The river of tears slowly turned into a sea, and the soil transmuted to sand before Naruto's very eyes, as the sun began to set, as early as 8 in the morning, as the two spandex-wearing S continued to hug each, oblivious to the pain felt by the onlookers and the world around them. Okay, so I admit I couldn't come up with a fitting word. Yosh, Lee. A youthful kindred soul has volunteered to join you on your youthful quest. The man named Guy said, turning to the newly arrived blonde, who was still in a daze from the fading illusionary beach and sunset jutsu, the sight of which was overwhelmingly nauseating and just wrong on so many levels. Huh? Did you say something? I'm sorry I didn't quite catch it. He asked, holding his head as he recovered. Is that even possible? From the debilitating effects of the almighty genjutsu. Such a hip and cool attitude. just like my rival Kakashi. Yosh, Lee, it seems you've just found yourself a youthful rival just like my own. Guy-sensei, Lee. Guy-sensei, Lee. Guy-sensei. As the two youthful, did I just say that? Shinobi continued to embrace the other in the youthful joy of their eternal springtime of youth. Naruto was ready this time. Closing his eyes, he knew he could not let the beach sunset no jutsu fully kick in. Adopting a taijutsu pose, he flew towards the spandex-wearing duo, coming in with a raging spin kick, sending the duo flying, though they both recovered in midair, righting themselves and landing in a handstand. Yosh, Lee. It seems your youthful eternal rival has a most youthful technique, rivaling the dynamic entry. But there were at least 6 flaws in the technique that I could point out off the top of my head. Come, youthful child, and allow us to assist you in awakening your true springtime of youth. Yosh, my brother in youth, I am Rock Lee, the beautiful green wild beast of Konoha. What is your name? My name is Naruto Uzumaki, and I'm gonna become the greatest ninja ever. Remember it, Yosh, Naruto-kun, from now onwards, you will be my eternal rival, just like Hatake Kakashi is Guy-sensei's eternal rival. Do you accept? Huh? Such a hip attitude, just as expected from my eternal rival. I challenge you to a most youthful spar. Do you accept? Excellent. Shall we begin? Okay, alright. But first, did you just say Hatake Kakashi? Do you know him? Can you tell me where to find him? Of course, he is Guy-sensei's eternal rival after all. Oh, thanks. Anything for my youthful rival, now let us begin. And with that, the beautiful green beast of Konoha took his battle-ready stance, and then charged. Naruto, though confused for a second, quickly gathered his wits and jumped back, as a bandaged fist passed through the air where he was a second ago. The spandex-wearing ninja in training didn't give up however, and continued to charge at him, increasing his speed with every moment, straining to keep up with Naruto, who, despite being a year younger, had been running from people much older than him ever since he was 4. Dodging the next punch and retaliating with an uppercut that was blocked by Lee, he was forced to duck to avoid a leaping spin kick performed by his adversary. But when Lee crouched low to execute a spinning sweep kick, Naruto was forced to jump into the air, leaving himself open against Lee's follow-up side kick. Naruto immediately brought his arms together in front of him in an X shape, trying to block the incoming kick. Though he did technically block, the force of the blow sent the blonde flying into a bush near the outskirts of the training ground. Man, did that kid hit hard. He certainly wasn't pulling his punches all right. Even now, Naruto's arms felt numb just from blocking it. The blow felt like a hammer slamming into him, blasting him away. Rubbing his arms, the blonde emerged from the bush, charging towards the beautiful green beast and engaging him once more, catching him off guard with a punch to the abdomen, causing him to bend over. Never one to give up though, Lee came back with a rising backward flip, catching the blonde under the chin and lifting him from the ground, following up with a devastating drop kick that sent him crashing into the ground. But before he could celebrate his victory, the blonde, before his very eyes, was reduced to dust as a voice sounded out from behind him. Wind release, great breakthrough. An enormous gust of wind blew out across the clearing, violently picking Lee up off the ground, and sending him careening into a tree at the far end of the training ground, hitting his head on the tree trunk. When Lee heard the voice ring out from behind him, he turned around trying to ascertain the direction of attack, but he was too late and the jutsu too widespread for him to be able to do anything but look on as he was unceremoniously lifted off the ground and slammed into a tree at the other side of the training field. Try as he might, he couldn't find the energy in him to stand up, the pain from the collision overriding all commands of his conscious mind. A shadow fell over him, and he looked up to see his eternal rival extending a hand out to him. Accepting the hand, Lee stood up, his head spinning still from the impact. Yosh, Naruto-kun, you are a worthy rival indeed. I shall defeat you next time, and prove that I can be a remarkable shinobi even without the use of ninjutsu or genjutsu. And if I cannot do that, then I will do 200 punches. Sweat drop. What a splendid performance, Lee-kun, Naruto-kun, truly the epitome of all that is youthful. You must join us again in our youthful endeavors, Naruto-kun. When did you switch out with a clone, Naruto-kun? Asked Lee, genuinely curious. Since you blasted me into that bush, he said, pointing to the area in question. Anyway, Guy-sensei. You said you could point out Hatake Kakashi to me. Ah yes, my eternal rival. Let us go then, my youthful students. And thus, he leapt away into the woods. Since when am I his student? Anyway, might as well follow him. Lee's gone as well. Seeing the clearing empty out around him, the blonde followed the duo, trying to keep up with the freaky pace they set. Hatake Kakashi was a lonely man. And despite the fact that pretty much everyone worth his salt in Konoha, well, the shinobi population at least, knew of him, he led a mostly isolated life. Having spent the past 11 years as an Anbu agent, ever since the death of his idol and sensei, the Ondaime Hokage, and the feelings of loss he felt upon losing his dearest teammates Uchiha Obito and Rin, he could no longer bear to socialize and take part in all the fun and games that his colleagues immersed themselves in, as if nothing was different. As if life could possibly go on after everyone close to him had been killed. The pain, it was unbearable. And so, he threw himself into the monotonous life of a Nanbu operative. Given his prodigious skills and implanted Sharingan eye, he rose through the ranks quickly, and it was not long before he was promoted to Anbu captain. With back-to-back high-level A and S rank missions, the misery of loss began to dull. In between, he sought refuge in his perverse selection of literature, which he would read shamelessly in public. After all high-ranking shinobi had some sort of coping mechanism or the other. Some resorted to drinking, some to extreme levels of sadism, some to perversion, some to gambling, some even chewed on senbon to release pent-up frustrations. So here we find this world-renowned shinobi kneeling before the memorial stone in Training Ground 7, seemingly muttering to himself. To the random passerby, one would think that he had lost it, but anyone who knew him would understand the solace that could be found in speaking to the friends and family that had departed, whether they could hear those words or not. Suddenly, he heard a rustling in the leaves, and he leaned back to avoid an insanely fast-moving green blur shooting past where his head had been just moments ago. Dynamic entry. Mitogai shouted as he landed on one leg, twirling about in a display of his youthful passion. "Ah, Kakashi, my youthful rival, what has you looking so gloomy this fine youthful morning? Here I've found a youthful soul searching for you, seeking to learn your hip and cool attitude," announced Guy, just as Naruto and Lee stumbled into the training field, the latter huffing and puffing after the 20-minute murderous, and youthful, sprint. Of all the things Kakashi could have expected, this was not any of them. For there was a boy standing before him, possessing a face so familiar, the resemblance was uncanny. But who was this boy? After observing him for a couple seconds, he realized who he was, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. The demon brat, the container of the infinitely powerful being of destruction that killed his sensei. Wait, sensei? That's who this boy resembled, from the bright blue eyes, to the spiky blonde hair, and everything in between. Was it possible? Could Sensei have made his own son into a Jinchuriki? No, he wouldn't have done that. But with each passing moment, his faith and his convictions wavered ever more. "Hey, I'm Naruto Uzumaki, the future most powerful ninja ever. You must be Hatake Kakashi, I presume?" He knew who this boy was. Kakashi just went on staring as the miniature version of his late sensei stood before him, awaiting a reply from the masked ninja. He just could not settle with believing that Sensei's Naruto was the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, yet, he hadn't known how he, who prided himself on his superior intellect and power of deduction, had never even seemed to notice this fact. Despite passing by him several times over the past several of years, Kakashi failed to comprehend. In his defense, however, on each of these occasions, he was on his way to or from a high-ranking mission or in the course of fulfilling his Anbu duties. Otherwise he would be too busy wallowing in his own guilt and self-pity that he would barely be paying much attention to those around him. No, this wasn't Sensei's son. He had died the night of the attack, the night Sensei died. This was the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi was trying to deceive everyone around it into complacency. Then, it would attack. Then it would show its true colors. But no, he wouldn't let it. He would kill the demon right now, and end things once and for all. Kakashi lifted his Hitae to reveal a red eye with 3 tomoe arranged in a circular pattern. The Sharingan, one of the most famed eyes in existence. A dojutsu that could see through an enemy's attacks and predict their movements, as well as see how they mold their chakra and memorize hand seals to be able to copy your adversary's each and every move. And it just so happened, that as the legendary Sharingan no Kakashi dashed ahead at elite Jounin speeds, cocking his fist back for a one-hit KO, a green blur intercepted his blow. "What are you doing, Kakashi?" Mitogai interjected, confusion and anger evident on his face. "What unyouthful behavior is this? He's the demon. He must be killed before he can destroy us all." Upon hearing this, said Blonde felt his heart give. This person, who he had spent days searching for, who was somehow related to his parents, who he had placed his hopes in, was the same. The same as every other damn person in the village. Just like the others, he failed to make a distinction between Bijou and Host. What a disappointment. He was just as ignorant as the others. How foolish he felt for having thought otherwise. But there was a silver lining to all this. Guy-sensei, and he felt no misgivings in thinking of him such, was protecting him, even though they had barely met an hour ago. Yet, he had jumped in to protect him. As Kakashi disengaged with the Jounin, he stared at the blonde demon, a stare full of hate. It was then that he felt a disruption in his chakra. Thanks to the Sharingan, he could see the volatile and sporadic spikes in his chakra that were characteristic of genjutsu. Holding his hands in a ram seal, the young Anbu captain spiked his chakra and suddenly released it all at once. Satisfied that the demon's attempt at ensnaring him in a genjutsu had been foiled, he lifted his gaze to look once more at the blonde. A look of absolute terror could be seen written across his face, prepared to flee were it not for the spandex-clad Jounin's interference. But this time, as Kakashi gazed into those blue orbs, something felt fundamentally different. All of that hate had suddenly evaporated, leaving him just standing there, confused by his actions. Thinking back to his actions, he realized that those intense feelings were not his own. He, with his calm and controlled demeanor, would never have given in to such a whimsical emotional compulsion. He had been controlled, his emotions played with. He had been tricked into Attack Naruto, who still stood behind Guy, a look of frustration marring his features. But who could have cast such a subtle and complex genjutsu? He shook his head, clearing his thoughts. He would have to ponder over that later. Right now, he had to run damage control. Lowering his hands, and stepping back a couple steps, "I'm sorry for my outburst, Naruto. I wasn't in the best state of mind a moment ago." He lowered his Hitai-8. "I'm truly sorry for attacking you. I don't know what came over me. Please forgive me." "You think I'm a demon, don't you?" "No, that's not it at all. Please understand, I thought you were someone else. But no, you're Uzumaki Naruto, the future most powerful shinobi ever. Can we just start again? Like from the beginning?" Naruto finally released the breath he had been holding, which he just realized had been the case. Beginning with a slightly awkward expression, he entered his intro pose and said, Okay. The name's Uzumaki Naruto, and I'm gonna be the most powerful shinobi ever." "Hello, I'm Hatake Kakashi. Pleased to meet you." "No really, I am pleased to meet you." The blonde raised an eyebrow at this, not really sure he could take this person's words at face value, especially after the stunt he had tried to pull earlier. "So, you were searching for me? What exactly did you need?" "I wanted to ask you some questions. About someone you knew." "Well, go on then. It's the least I can do." "Did you know of a woman called Uzumaki Kushina?" Kakashi looked on, flabbergasted. It was highly unlikely for Naruto to have come across that name purely by chance. It was far too improbable. He would have to ask Hokage-sama about it. Across from them both, Guy too was curious about where Naruto had heard of Kushina, while Lee looked on in confusion. Nevertheless, he immediately understood the look Kakashi sent his way. This was not something to be discussed out in public. "Lee, it's time to fan our flames of youth, lest they die out for lack of training." "Yosh, let us embrace the flames of youth, or else they will be extinguished due to our inattention." And so, the duo set off to who knows where, to do who knows what. "Where did you hear that name?" "From Tsuchiyoji-san at Ichiraku Ramen." "Why, does the name hold some importance for you?" "He did say you knew her." "Why yes. I knew her quite well. In fact, when I was a young Jonin, my Jounin sensei was the Yondaime Hokage." "What? You learned from the Yondaime? Wow." "Ahem, as I was saying, I studied under Yondaime-sama, and Kushina Uzumaki was very close to him. In fact, she was like a mother to me." "Do you know how she died?" "Yes, she was killed by the Kyuubi." "Did she have any children?" "Why the sudden interest, Naruto? This is the private life of someone very close to me you're asking about." "I want to know because she, like me, was an Uzumaki, possibly the only other one in Konoha, and I thought that maybe we could be related." "I think Hokage-sama would be a better person to ask. He knew her longer. Plus, he would know what to say and what not to say." "As I thought, Hokage Gigi knew, but kept me in the dark about my heritage." He clenched his fists in anger, but then released them once more and the mask of innocence and calm resurfaced. "Gigi said he doesn't know about any Uzumaki during the time before my birth, since he was officially retired back then." "Bullshit. There isn't a ninja in the elemental nations Jounin upwards that Sandaime-sama hasn't heard of." "Well, Naruto, how about I answer your questions tonight, eh? Over dinner, how does that sound?" "Fabulous, Ichiraku Ramen then, okay?" "Ichiraku it is, then. Be there at 8. I have got to talk this over with Hokage-sama before I answer his questions." If Hokage-sama hasn't told Naruto about his parents, then there must have been a reason not to. Then there is also the issue of that genjutsu. Kakashi suddenly disappeared with a body flicker jutsu, leaving a cloud of smoke in his wake. As Naruto watched the Hatake Kakashi vanish into smoke, man, I've so gotta learn how to do that. And then the blonde remembered that in all of the excitement, he hadn't gotten any training done all day. Well, there was still an hour or two before noon, so he might as well make use of it. Half an hour later found him back at training ground 3, deliberating over what he should practice on today. However, his thoughts kept returning to his short spar with Lee. Even though he had won on the basis of his ninjutsu and sneakiness, he knew that with respect to taijutsu, he had been overwhelmed. There hadn't been enough time for a decisive taijutsu battle, but when he thought back to it, he knew he would have been beaten were it not for his ability to use ninjutsu. Lee's blows were heavy, and he was fast. Naruto considered himself to be quite quick, and if it came down to a race between the two, or a test of endurance, he was fairly confident of his chances, but Lee's speed was nothing to laugh at either. In addition, Lee's moves were very well coordinated, as if he had practiced and executed them hundreds of times, if he went by the fluidity of his movements. It was not that the blonde didn't practice taijutsu. He would perform punches and kicks, practicing jumps and measure his sprint time. But his moves were still untested. He had actually used them in battle for the first time today. After mulling over the problem for what seemed like hours, he had an epiphany. I need a training partner. Naruto ducked behind a dustbin as a three-man squad of military police passed by. The outskirts of the Uchiha compound, which was far removed from the center of the village, were heavily patrolled by the military police. Seeing as it was predominantly under the influence of the Uchiha clan, even though non-Uchihas could also join if they so wished. Sneaking by the patrol, Naruto jumped the wall. It had been barely 5 seconds when the alarm was sounded, and hordes of footsteps could be heard. Ducking into an alley, he waited as a dozen officers barreled past, and then, careful not to be seen, he arrived in front of the largest house in the compound. The clan head's residence, no doubt. Behind the house, there was a yard and training field. Upon arriving there, Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu. A high-pitched voice roared, as a giant fireball could be seen on its way towards a 5-foot tree trunk, which was already black, apparently as a result of a constant effort to incinerate it, a tree trunk behind which our favorite blonde was currently hiding. Realizing where things were heading, Naruto sprang out from behind the trunk, but he hadn't enough time to fully escape the scope of the fireball. Thinking on his feet and rushing through the 7 hand seals required, he lifted his fingers to his mouth, blowing out with all his might. Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu. Whoever said fight fire with fire certainly wasn't a ninja. As the two fireballs clashed, each pushing against the other, trying their utmost to establish dominance over the other, Naruto saw that his fireball was being pushed back. In an attempt to save his life, he started pouring more and more chakra into the attack, but for all the good it did, he may as well not even have tried. Admittedly, the extra boost he gave his jutsu was sufficient for overcoming the incoming fireball, however, it came at the cost of control. The two jutsu destabilized, blowing up in the faces of the two chance adversaries. The blast sent both ninja flying back, their clothes singed by the searing heat of the explosion. Small scorch marks riddled their arms and faces. As Naruto got up, he looked around him. The training post he had been hiding behind had been reduced to ashes, and across the clearing, lay the boy he had come to find. Approaching the downed figure, he heard voices behind him, and just in time, sprinted into the forest to take cover behind one of the trees. Moments later, 3 cadets of the military police showed up, worry etched on their faces as they saw the general's youngest son on the ground, struggling to stand. His clothes showing evident signs of being burned. "Sasuke-kun, what happened? Are you alright?" We heard an explosion. Finding the strength to stand on his own 2 feet, the boy called Sasuke looked back at the cadets. He was a fair-skinned young boy who had onyx eyes and chin-length black hair, which was spiky in the back, his bangs coming down over his eyes. He wore the traditional Uchiha clan outfit, a short-sleeved black shirt with a high collar, displaying the Uchiha emblem on the back. "It's nothing. I was just practicing with my fire jutsu and it exploded in my face." "Should we take you to the hospital, Sasuke-kun?" No, there's no need. I'm perfectly alright." "If you say so, I guess." With that, the trio of cadets left. That was odd. Sasuke thought. The Gokaku no Jutsu has never blown up in my face before. And there was a delay between hitting the training post and exploding. It was just hanging in mid-air, like some unseen force from the other side was pushing it back. And the heat. He had never felt such intensity before. It was strong enough for 2, maybe even 3 fireballs. Before he could come to a conclusion, a blonde, whisker-faced boy of about 11 years emerged from the foliage, showing signs of scorch marks along his face and arms, just like Sasuke's own. Oh, he knew this person. He knew him very well. He was the class stubby, who couldn't even get a single clone right. Yet, he was arrogant. He thought he could face off against an Uchiha, a superior ninja by birth. In spite of that, not a month would pass by where he wouldn't challenge him. Him. The top of his class Uchiha prodigy. That is, until 10 months ago. He had just stopped. No more challenges. No more screaming to the world how he would be Hokage. No more horrid jumpsuit. Yeah, he couldn't believe he'd forgotten about that. The orange eyesore that Naruto was so enamored of. He'd abandoned it all. He was actually relieved. What are you doing here, Tobi? I can be wherever I want to be. Speaking with Sasuke just got him riled up and defensive for no reason at all. Well, this is Uchiha property, so leave. Oh, so is that why you decided to send a humongous fireball my way? What? That was you that caused my fireball to explode? You really are good for nothing but destruction, aren't you? Had it not been for my own fireball in return, I would have been burned to a crisp. Is that how you treat guests, team? Humph, you couldn't make a fireball to save your life. Well, newsflash team. I just did. Where? Oh yeah. Well, I'll show you then. Going through the 7 hand seals required for the jutsu, Kaden, Gokaku no Jutsu. He blew outwards, launching a fireball in the direction of the 2 remaining training posts, the third having been destroyed as a result of the earlier explosion. With a smug expression set on his face, he turned to see the look on Sasuke's face. It was murderous. The boy in question marched up to the blonde, holding him by his collar. Where did you learn the Gokaku no Jutsu? It's an Uchiha clan secret, you thieving dobe. Yes, a secret your clan probably stole from another clan in the first place. What do you call a clan of freaky-eyed, jutsu poaching policemen anyway? Tell me where you learned it from, Dobi, he demanded, shaking him violently. I learned it from the library. It's not really that big of a secret, team. Well, what are you doing here anyway? I came here for a spar. It's been a long time, and I needed a training partner. After what happened the last time we sparred? Flashback. It was a nice warm morning, early autumn where the intense heat of the summer months had passed by, and the chill of the winter months had yet to set in. Barely a month into the academic year, 2 boys stood facing each other on an elevated platform. Between the 2 stood a man of average height with brown hair kept in a ponytail. His defining feature was a scar that ran across the bridge of his nose. He wore a Chunin flak jacket and the Konoha Hitai on his forehead. It was the first monthly exam, which consisted of several sections, one of which was the no-holds spar that was about to ensue. The entire class standing in a circle in the training field outside the academy, pairs of students were chosen to come up front to fight each other one-on-one. No restrictions. Of course, they were only allowed blunt weapons. The upcoming match just so happened to be everyone's favorite, where the all-popular sign of the famed Uchiha clan pounded on the class dobi, and everybody could have their share of a laugh at the expense of the guy that had the guts to mess with anyone and anyone out there, sparing not even the teachers of his pranks. Are you 2 ready to begin? Yes, sensei. 2 voices said in unison, one markedly more enthusiastic about it than the other. Then, on your marks, Hajime. Bringing his hand down, Umino Iruka jumped back, as the 2 rivals, in the blonde's opinion, dashed forward, tossing blunted shuriken at each other as they dodged and maneuvered, none of the projectiles hitting their target as the 2 engaged. Naruto went in for a punch, but Sasuke ducked and the blonde overextended himself, leaving himself open for Sasuke to sweep his feet out from beneath him. Go, Sasuke-kun. You're the best, Sasuke-kun. Beat that baka into the ground. He's just a loser. Way to go, Sasuke-kun. But Naruto wasn't down for the count yet. Getting up, he charged once more, as he kicked the young boy standing before him, before the illusion disappeared into nothing, and he looked behind him to see a beach ball-sized fireball heading his way. He had no time to get out of the way, and so he crossed his arms in front of him, preparing for the worst. That's quite enough, Sasuke. You've won, said Iruka, as he interfered, pulling Naruto out of the way. Humph. A loser like always, Dobe. You can never be my equal. Sasuke-kun is so cool. Murmurs spread throughout the crowd. Just you wait. I'll beat you for sure next time. Learn some ninjutsu before you come face me next time, Dobe. You bet I will, team. Just you wait. Naruto-kun. I wish I had the same determination as you. The same strength to move on and face everything in life with a smile on my face. A meek young girl with lavender eyes and dark blue hair stood watching, with a smile on her face. Flashback end. This time is gonna be radically different. I've trained my butt off for this fight, and I won't lose. I even learned some ninjutsu as I said I would. Humph. Regardless, Adobe like you could never hope to qualify as my sparring partner, let alone my equal. Oh, yeah, we'll see when I rub your face in the dirt. Well fine then. If you can make this battle last 5 minutes, I'll accept you as a suitable training partner. Just watch me. Taking their stances, both boys stared at each other, each boy waiting for the other to make the first move. Sasuke darted forward, starting the fight with an opening jab to the chest. Naruto immediately parried, moving a step back to maintain his distance. A grin broke out on his face. Sasuke, of course, was only testing the waters. Once more, he moved forward with a side kick to the stomach, only for Naruto to sidestep and retaliate with a sweeping kick, knocking Sasuke off his feet. Before Naruto could press the advantage, Sasuke landed with a twin-handed handstand, flipping backwards in midair to come to a stop 2 meters behind his original position. It seems the Uchiha aren't so mighty after all. The blonde taunted. Don't get cocky. This fight hasn't even started yet. Sasuke replied, as he took his stance once more. In reality, he was amazed that Naruto could even keep up with him, let alone have the upper hand. Just a couple months ago, Naruto wouldn't have lasted a minute against him. He had definitely improved. He was brought out of his thoughts as he lifted his arms to defend himself from a rising kick to his chin, but Naruto's kick didn't even connect. Too late did he realize that it had been a feint, as the real deal came down in the form of a devastating dropkick. Leaping back at the last moment, he wasn't fast enough to completely evade the attack as it struck his forehead, then his nose and finally glanced by his chest. Raising his hands up to his nose, he found them stained in crimson, stained in his blood. He was taking this fight easy. And he paid for it. No more. He would be pulling out the stops now. Moving as fast as he could, just as his brother had showed him, he started bombarding his foe with shuriken, all the while not stopping for a second. Naruto soon found himself assaulted by the full power of an Uchiha's rage as he dodged the hail of shuriken, one after the other. Ducking past the first 5, he leapt to the right to dodge the next set of 3 shuriken, failing to notice the fourth that came from right behind him, slicing into his shoulder. Blood dripping from his wound, shallow as it was, Naruto pulled out the shuriken lodged in his shoulder, just in time to see Sasuke running through a set of hand seals he recognized all too well. Quickly forming an earth clone beside him, he retreated, as his earth clone too went through hand seals for a jutsu. Finishing together, the two shouted, "Kaden, Gokakyu no Jutsu/Fuuten, Datapa." The two simultaneous blasts of wind and fire flew at each other at violent speeds, finally clashing in the middle of the two contestants. The moment the two clashed, there was an explosion, the wind stoking the flames and blowing them out of proportion. Within seconds, the fireball the size of a chair had grown to twice the size of an elephant, instantaneously overwhelming the blast of wind opposing it. The blonde standing before it never stood a chance. Panting from the effort, Sasuke approached the site of the explosion to find nothing but a charred corpse, with third-degree burns running down its body. Did I just kill the Dobi? How's that possible? In fact, that fire was far too strong. My normal fireball jutsu isn't even 1/10 the size and intensity of what just happened. However, before he could comment, it withered away to dust. Damn it, team. Are you trying to kill me or what? He heard a voice speak out from behind him. Startled, Sasuke looked behind him to see Naruto holding a kunai to his neck. How did he escape from that attack? Naruto was completely unharmed, except for the remnants of that first explosion some 15 minutes ago, and a cut on his shoulder from when a shuriken had pierced it. How did you do that? I saw it with my own eyes. You were dead center of my fire jutsu. Well, learn your lesson, team. Never let Uzumaki Naruto out of your sight. The blonde wagged his finger at him, almost as if he was provoking him. That's it. I think that's enough for today, don't you think? Sasuke? Naruto-kun? A young male voice interrupted, taking hold of Naruto's kunai and pushing it away from Sasuke's neck. Both young shinobi in training turned to look at the new arrival, an average-height youth of about 16 years, who with his jet black hair and intense onyx gaze, struck an intimidating figure, though otherwise he appeared to be pretty much a regular teen. Nissan, quite an interesting fight. I'm surprised you were able to surprise Sasuke like that. Well, I've been training my butt off. There'd better be some results. My name is Uchiha Itachi. I'm Sasuke's older brother. Nice to meet you. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, the soon-to-be strongest ninja ever. Yes, my Itoto has told me quite a lot about you. Though it seems his description might have been a bit off. While Itachi was speaking with Naruto, Sasuke stood in the background, clenching his fists in frustration. The more he tried to catch up with his brother and surpass all his peers, the further away he seemed from achieving his goals. If he lost to someone who was inferior to him, a no-name clanless loser, could he ever hope to defeat his brother, who was a prodigy among prodigies, hailing from the legendary Uchiha clan? Why? Why is it that no matter how much I train, I just can't seem to earn the recognition of Tosan? Even though it was his dream that his father would recognize him, and praise him just as he praised Itachi, Sasuke always fell short of the yardstick his father would measure him by. Despite the fact that he would receive the top scores in everything, he was not the jewel of his father's eyes, nor was he the pride of the clan like Itachi was. He was always ignored as second best. "Where did you learn that wind jutsu, Naruto-kun?" asked Itachi, genuinely surprised that an orphan like Naruto would have learned a wind nature ninjutsu even though he had no known teacher to speak of. "I learned it from a book in the library." "Why does everybody ask me that?" he screamed out in protest. "Hey, calm down, I was just curious how you managed to defeat my brother, since he's top in his class and I train him too sometimes, so he's not that bad." "Huh? Could you train me too? I really need a teacher." "I'm sorry Naruto-kun. Between my Ambu duties and helping my brother, I wouldn't be able to take out enough time from my schedule, but I'll try to find you one." Turning to Sasuke, "Sasuke, you know why you lost?" Sasuke refused to look up, glaring at the ground as Itachi went on. "Because you underestimated your opponent and got hit as a result. Then you let your rage consume you, blinding you to what possibilities may have been, and so you were taken by surprise." "Since when were you watching?" Finally raising his face, now glaring at Naruto instead. "Since the very beginning, after that explosion. Once again, I must say that you need to watch yourself. You fired a fireball at a training post, not noticing a person behind it. I'm disappointed." "As for you Naruto-kun, this is Uchiha clan property. What are you doing here?" This brought a smirk to Sasuke's face. Seeing the Dobi being berated would any day, especially now that the blonde had defeated him. "I've decided that Sasuke team will be my training partner." "I think that is an excellent idea. What do you say, Sasuke?" "Hey, the team here just lost a bet. He said if I could make this fight last 5 minutes he would train with me," he pointed out, "unless he's too chicken of course." "HN." A grunt was his only reply. Itachi gave him his favorite Uchiha glare, complete with the red eyes and all. "Okay, fine." He finally relented. "How about you two meet up on weekends here, and I might even show up to give you some pointers." "Sure, that's perfect, since it gives me some time to train on my own as well." "HN." "Well, before you leave, here's a pointer. Since both of you were using elemental techniques." "What's an elemental technique?" Giving a sigh, an elemental technique is one in which you convert your chakra to that of a particular element of nature. This may be water, fire, wind, lightning or earth. For example, the Gokaku no Jutsu is a fire element release jutsu, whereas Fuuten Daitapa is a wind release jutsu. Some people have an affinity for one element while others have an affinity for another. For example, most of the Uchiha clan have an affinity for fire jutsu. "An affinity? What's that?" "Ever the dead last?" Naruto asked. Even though his being dead last was not a result of low IQ or anything of the like, merely the treatment of his teachers and the loss of interest that resulted from it. An affinity is basically which element you can use the most easily, and most powerfully. Trying to get back to the topic at hand, anyway, as I was saying. These elements form a cycle in the given order: water, fire, wind, lightning, earth, water. Each element is weak against the one preceding it, and strong against the one succeeding it. So when Naruto-kun used a wind attack, it was immediately overwhelmed by Sasuke's fire attack. Keep that in mind next time you spar. "How do you know what your affinity is?" "Wait till the weekend. I'll tell you then. Now, go on. This sparring session is over." And so, our favorite blonde sulked off to pass the time elsewhere, unable to wait till dinner, when he would learn about his clan. Having expelled the intruder from their midst, the two Uchiha turned to each other, their eyes meeting for the first time. Well, little brother. It seems that the class Dobi is anything but. You seem to have found yourself a worthy rival." "Nii-san. Train me. Please." Itachi extended his hand to reach over to Sasuke. "Maybe some other time, Atoto." As he poked him in the forehead. "In the meanwhile, why don't you go train with Kiyomi-chan? I'm sure she'll be happy to indulge you." In a ramen stand on the other side of the village, a blonde 10-year-old going on 11 stumbled into the entrance, his appearance disheveled. A masked man with spiky gravity-defying hair sat waiting. "You're late," was his warm welcome. To Kakashi, these words coming from his mouth seemed just unnatural. He never waited for anybody. Never. But today, he felt sympathy for the boy in front of him, and decided to spare him the horror that was waiting for Hatake Kakashi. Sorry Kakashi-san. I was being chased by those stupid Uchiha police people, so I had to hide and wait them out." "Okay. So I won't ask what you were doing that made them chase you. I'm here, you wanted some answers. So ask away." "Did Uzumaki Kushina have any children?" "Well, she was pregnant the last time I saw her. In fact, I was her guard during her pregnancy. But I failed to protect her when it mattered most. It is one of my greatest regrets. She gave me the day off the day of the Kyuubi attack. In fact, she was supposed to give birth that day." "So, did she?" "Well, I wasn't there. But there is one thing I do know." Creating an air of suspense. "Well? What is it?" "Her son was to be named Naruto." Silence. That was all that he received. No shouts of surprise, exclamation, no expression of anger. Just silence. "Then, was she my mother?" "Apparently, yes." Naruto didn't know what to feel. He knew who his mother was. And so did Gigi for that matter. But he lied to me all my life. This man also knew his mother. Very well, if he was to be believed. But still, he hadn't inquired after her son. He had just left him to rot, like the rest of the village. But he told him in the end, that had to count for something, right? "How long have you known?" "Since this morning, really. When you asked me about her, something clicked, and I realized that you must be her son. Once again, I'm sorry for attacking you like that. I guess he can be redeemed." "Can you tell me who my father was?" His voice dropping to an all-time low. A sort of pleading tone in his tone. Kakashi hesitated. He really wanted to tell Naruto about his father, but... Flashback no jutsu. A man with gravity-defying silver hair, and a leaf Hittite stood in a circular office, facing an old man sitting at a desk before him. "Hokage-sama, is Naruto-sensei's and Kushina-sensei's son?" "How long have you known?" "Since just this morning. Naruto came to me asking about her. And so he told him about his encounter with the blonde that morning." "And what did you tell him?" "I told him I would answer his questions over dinner, so I could come and consult you first." "You did the right thing, Kakashi." "What should we do, Hokage-sama?" "He's bound to find out eventually." "You know how important it is that Minato's enemies never find out about Naruto, or else they may attempt to take our Jinchuriki for themselves. Konoha is already weakened from the Kyuubi attack and we haven't yet recovered to full force. You know what loss of our Jinchuriki could mean? We would lose our position at the top of the shinobi world." "But he's Sensei's son. He has a right to know who his parents were. He's practically figured out the identity of his mother already anyway. Is that all you think of him as? As Konoha's Jinchuriki?" "We cannot risk it. Tell him about Kushina if you must, but not about Minato under any circumstances. Konoha must always come first. Before family, before friends. Before the life and feelings of each and every individual. As long as the tree stands firm, then anything else is a necessary sacrifice." "This is not the Hokage-sama I've always known. He always used to tell me about the will of fire, and that a village is its people. Something is wrong." "He is certainly hiding something. There is no point in talking to him about the genjutsu. I need some time to sort things out." "Hi, Hokage-sama." Flashback Kakashi was torn between guilt and obedience to his leader. But he knew that something was wrong. The way the Hokage completely disregarded any of his pleas for forbidding the villagers from attacking Naruto, or from assigning him a protection unit, as if he wanted them to attack Naruto. But what could be his objective? This was the kind of thing Danzo would be expected to do, not the kind old man that was the Hokage. After what felt like several minutes of deliberation, he came to a decision. He could not just stick by his orders, especially when he knew something was seriously wrong. After all, those that abandon their comrades are worse than scum. Abandoning Naruto and deceiving him would be like betraying his sensei, and what would that make him? "Naruto, come with me." Placing the money on the counter, alongside his unfinished bowl of ramen, Kakashi stood up, walking away from the stand, Naruto following right behind him. "Naruto, what you need to understand is that the identity of your father is a secret, an S-class secret. The Hokage has forbidden me from telling you." "Why?" "Every child should has the right to knowing who his father is." "I agree, and that's why I'm telling you this, but you must promise to never ever let anyone know the identity of your father, and you must never let out the fact that I told you who he was. If you can promise me that, I'll tell you." "Sure, I promise." "Naruto, your father's name was Namikaze Minato. more generally known as the Yondaime Hokage, and my own sensei. To say Naruto was shocked would be the understatement of the century. Him, some no-name clanless loser, as Sasuke-teen would put it, was the son of the Yondaime Hokage, one of the greatest shinobi to have ever lived. That was nigh unbelievable. I don't believe you. It's your decision, whether you believe it or not, but you might want to see the similarities you possess, like your bright blue eyes, blonde hair etc. It hit him like a bombshell. He really did look a hell of a lot like the Yondaime. His facial features, especially. He even had this tendency of often going to sit on his head at the Hokage monument. How he failed to notice this before, it completely escaped him. It was like a dam had been broken as a river of new ideas flowed into his mind. Why would the Hokage keep this a secret? Had he told the people, Naruto would have been respected. He would have been loved as the son of the village's favorite Hokage and its hero, because your father had a lot of enemies, and Hokage-sama was afraid that if word got out, you would be kidnapped. He could have had me protected from the villagers. Could you tell me more about my parents? About both of them, like what they were like? Sure. Your mother was much like you. Impulsive and stubborn. But she was also cheerful and very kind. Violet eyes and the fiery red hair that the Uzumaki clan was famous for. She was a very strong and powerful shinobi. Strong enough to beat me hands down, especially when she used those chakra chains of hers. And your father, well, any history book would hold complete chapters on him. The fastest shinobi to ever live, Sensei was truly an exceptional person, a legend. He looked much like you, and he was pretty popular with the ladies. Always calm and collected. In fact, he left me the keys to his house, where your parents lived. If you want, I could take you there. Really? Please, take me there. Fine. Just remember your promise. I will. Kakashini. A tall man with spiky silver hair stood before a mundane-looking house, in a mundane-looking street in a mundane-looking neighborhood, beside him a young boy with spiky blonde hair. The man stepped forward, removing a key from his hip pocket, beckoning the boy closer. And here it is, your parents' house. Go on, Naruto, open it. As he handed the boy the key, the blonde, taking the key, approached the gate, which was the only conspicuous feature of the house. Most houses in the area had no such high walls or gates, and even the ones that did, they didn't hold a swirling pattern on the front. As he went closer, he could feel chakra emanating from the door, a familiar chakra, calling out to him. Warmth like never before. As he took hold of the doorknob, ready to insert the key in its hole, he felt something. A prick. A tiny subtle prick on his palm. Removing his hand in shock, he saw that the wound had already closed, and nothing seemed amiss. Right then, a series of audible clicks took place, and the front gate swung open of its own accord, leaving a pair of bewildered onlookers. Well, that was unexpected, said Naruto with a blank look. No, actually, it's not really all that surprising. After all, Sensei never needed a key to enter his home. Nor did your mother for that matter. There must be some sort of security system that immediately recognized you as the owner of the house. But I can't really say. Both your parents were masters of Fuyu and Jutsu at a level I couldn't even hope to achieve. His expression hidden behind his face mask. When I first touched the doorknob, there was a prick to my finger, very slight, but noticeable. Any idea what that could mean? Of course, a blood seal. How simple, but how effective. What's a blood seal? It's a sort of Fuyu and Jutsu that is activated when it comes in contact with blood. The seal reacts in a specific way if it recognizes the blood as belonging to a specific individual, type or lineage, in this case by unlocking the door. Wow, so it recognized me as the rightful owner of this place just by my blood? Yeah. Though Sensei just used to flare his chakra and it would open. Unable to continue standing outside the house as if this was completely normal, the blonde made to enter the building. Kakashi placed a hand on his shoulder, holding him back. Naruto, maybe you should explore some other time. There's something we must do right now. Oh, and one more thing. No one must see you enter or leave this neighborhood, not the villagers, not the shinobi, especially not the Anbu, and under no circumstances, the Hokage. If someone finds out, my life will be forfeit, and I don't know what will happen to you. If things come down to the worst, your memories might even be locked away. No problem, Kakashi-ni-san. I'll make sure no one sees me around. Glancing around, Naruto saw no one, so he asked, "What is it that you said we had to do right now anyway?" "Disappear from here without a trace, and show up at Ichiraku's in 20 minutes for dinner. You didn't eat out of excitement when we went there last time. If anyone asks you where you were, tell them you were training. I'll meet you there." 20 minutes later, at Ichiraku's ramen stand, we find a noisy young blonde enthusiastically slurping away at God's gift to mankind, that is miso ramen. "Old man, I'll have 3 more bowls of miso. This stuff is the best. And even though this stuff really did feel like the best, Naruto doubted it had that much to do with its inherent nature and taste. After all, most if not everyone else disagreed with him. He assumed that the thing which got him addicted to ramen was the fact that it was all he had, or could have had. Old Mangekyou was the only storekeeper or food stand owner that did not kick him out, overcharge him or look at him with blatant disdain, and actually treated him like a decent human being. It was from this sentiment that his love and appreciation for the food developed. And even though, despite his massive appetite and metabolism, he was quite nicely fed by the time he had had his 5th or 6th bowl, yet he would persist, until he had consumed at least a dozen. This wasn't due to uncontrolled gluttony or anything of the like, no. It was his way of showing appreciation for feeding him, even though it lost them half their customers, the only way he knew how. The people who boycotted us due to us treating you like a normal customer, well, don't worry about them much. They are the real demons, and we don't serve demons anyway, he had said. So had Ayame, his daughter, who was barely a couple years older than Naruto herself. And Naruto agreed. For the villagers to be so blind and hateful as to not even eat at a place the demon brat ate at was just sad. They really were demons, and if he could have gotten away with it, he would have done to them whatever they had done to him and to the precious few that stood up for him. But alas, that was not to be. But Naruto still felt like he had to compensate them somehow for what they were sacrificing, so he decided to eat as much as he could, and make sure the two sold as much as they could. Just then, another man walked into the ramen stand. He looked around to see Hatake Kakashi with his trademark eye smile sitting on the stool next to him. Yo, hello again, Kakashi-ni-san. So, why'd you call me here? Shh. Not so loud. The Hokage has a special technique by which he can observe us from above. And even though he can't hear us, you never know if someone's eavesdropping on us. As a shinobi, you must learn to always stay alert. That's why I called you here. I told the Hokage we'd be meeting at 9:30 to discuss the questions you had about your mother. He's probably watching us right now, with the use of his viewing orb. We must keep up the act of talking for around half an hour, and then we can go our separate ways. Just remember, there is always an Anbu squad watching you. If you want to go anywhere near your father's house, make sure to lose them, he whispered. So what do we do for half an hour? Anything. Just keep talking. Fine then, you learned from the Yondaime, right? Could you train me? He was your father, you know. You don't have to refer to him as the Yondaime Hokage. And I don't know, I'm currently an Anbu, I'd have to leave if I were to train you. He may have been the one that brought me to this world, but all my life, he has only been the Yondaime Hokage to me. Besides, go on. What kind of father would seal a demon inside his own son, and then leave him to rot at the mercy of the villagers? Aren't fathers supposed to love and protect their children, especially when they are infants? Why did he have to seal the Kyuubi inside me? Naruto, your parents loved you. In fact, they named you after a character from a book, a hero who brought peace to the world. Sensei didn't seal the Kyuubi inside of you to spite you, rather he entrusted its power to you so that you could learn to harness its chakra and bring the world to peace. Couldn't someone else bring peace to the world? Sensei couldn't possibly ask another family for something he himself was not willing to give. It had to be you. Besides, the Jinchuriki, or Bijou host, has always been a close relative of the Kage, in order to ensure loyalty to the village. Loyal? Don't make me laugh. The blonde clenched his teeth. So I was the sacrificial lamb, huh? To protect the pathetic citizens of this village, and to make peace with the probably just as pathetic citizens of villages across the elemental nations, I've been condemned to a life of suffering. They will soon know how sorely mistaken they were. I'll show them who I really am. And then they'll regret everything they did. Kakashi didn't know what to make of the conversation he had had with the blonde. On one hand, his concerns were pretty genuine, especially when coming from a 10 going on 11-year-old. And that last sentence, it could have been taken in a completely positive light. After all, that's what the Sundaime had tasked him with. To somehow ensure that Naruto's goal was to change the views of the villagers, and show them that he was really just a normal human. But then why did he have that ominous and foreboding feeling, as if things were about to go downhill and out of control real fast? Several days later, the academy would be starting the next day, And it was the 10th time that day that Naruto was tempted to go back to that neighborhood where his parents' house lay. That innate feeling, the craving to get to know your parents, who they were, what they were like, to feel that you were loved by someone, sometime. To catch a glimpse of his mother, what she looked like. His father. His feelings regarding his father were conflicted, truth be told. His father was the one who had sealed the QB inside him, damning him to a life of hell. He had been sacrificed. For the sake of the village. For the sake of these fools who barely understood the implications of being a Jinchuriki. Who barely understood what he was holding back. Who barely thought of what would happen if he died. Who barely considered the fire they were playing with. A foolish lot indeed. And his life was destroyed for their sake. He would rather they had burned in hell. Yet, he felt a craving to go back there. To find some epsilon of evidence that this was a misunderstanding. That his father had cared. That his mother had cared. Yet, he held himself back. For a week, Naruto had been trying to keep track of the Anbu guards that Kakashi had mentioned were assigned to him. For the better part of the week, he could barely find any trace of them. Until one of them slipped. A boar mask. A boar mask was all that gave it away. Ever since that day when he became aware of the Anbu trailing him, he decided to go on a pranking spree. There was barely a shop, other than Ichiraku's of course, that hadn't been subjected to the blonde's mischief, nor any clan for that matter. But this time, wherever he went he would look around and watch, trying to discern who followed him. The Anbu were good. There was no doubt about that. For days, he could catch neither sight nor sign of them. Until one day Naruto spotted a man standing on the roof of a building opposite the store he had just entered. The man in question was garbed in full Anbu gear and wore a boar mask. Now this in and of itself was not so uncommon. Even though Anbu usually operated from the shadows, occasional sightings here and there in the village were not so far outside the norm. In fact, he suspected that most of these sightings were on purpose. The Anbu allowed the villagers to spot them on occasion to help them feel secure and know that they were being protected at all times. Also the fact that the Anbu agent was facing his direction and presumably staring at the door to the grocery store he was in wasn't so much of an immediate giveaway. Rather, it was the realization that he couldn't find the Anbu because he was looking in the wrong places. He was looking for someone to be shadowing him, following him around the streets and mixing among the common folk. But the fact of the matter was that they never frequented the roads at all. They would leap from roof to roof, and probably pass through forested areas, high up in the canopy, and so anyone who was not an experienced ninja, and even someone who was, would have a hard time finding them. It was with this in mind that Naruto began his search anew. Focusing on areas that were not frequented, he saw a pattern. The Anbu he spotted, on the few occasions he did, keeping up the facade of ignorance of course, would always be wearing a boar mask. After seeing the boar mask about 5 times in 4 days, he was led to conclude that that was probably the only operative stuck with following him. He couldn't have been too highly skilled if he had managed to spot him. After all, keeping tabs on an 11-year-old kid, Jinchuriki or not, couldn't possibly be too high on the Hokage's priority list. By the time a week had passed since his talk with Kakashi, and one day before the start of his 3rd year at the Ninja Academy, Naruto had formulated a plan. Early that morning, he prepared to leave right after breakfast. Creating an Earth clone, he gave it instructions to go have breakfast at Ichiraku Ramen and then go on to buy groceries from the supermarket, and somehow arrive at the Uchiha compound at 2 o'clock. Having done that, Naruto climbed to the roof of his apartment building, lying low, and making sure he remained unseen. On his signal, his clone walked out the front door, making sure he was as conspicuous as possible, seemingly on his way to Ichiraku as per his routine. Watching from afar, Naruto waited, and before long he was rewarded with the sight of a figure slinking out of a nearby tree, hiding behind alleys, and taking to the rooftops as it followed roughly, the Earth clone as it made its way through the village. Almost jumping for joy, he punched the air in success. Waiting several more minutes for good measure, the blind finally decided to set out for his destination. Having geared up beforehand, Naruto climbed out of his window, silently leaving from the back of the building. It was a mere 10 minutes later that Naruto, underhinged to look like an old man with a balding head, stood outside the door to the house he had been yearning to visit for a week now. Looking around, making sure no one had followed him, he walked forward, placing his hand upon the doorknob. At once, he heard several metallic clicks, and the door swung open. Swiftly entering, the door closed behind him. He was finally there. This was the home his parents had prepared for him. For them. He looked around. Even though it looked quite mundane from the outside, from the inside, it was anything but. As he walked into the entrance hall, which was flanked on either side by a doorway, leading to the drawing and living rooms respectively, He couldn't help but marvel at the sight before him. Now, even though this wasn't a scene from out of some daimyo's palace or the like, with the walls hidden behind portraits and suits of armor and jewels lining practically everything, it did give a sense of belonging to a relatively well-off family that had no qualms about decorating their home with whatever suited their fancy. Walking into the drawing room, he found it to be quite informative. At the center of the main wall was a portrait, a relatively large one at that, showing three people. A woman he immediately recognized as his mother, with her flowing red hair and purple eyes. There was no question who she was. Standing beside her was a man, about a head taller than her, his hand resting on Kushina's rounding belly. He too, Naruto recognized, from the Hokage monument, from his history books, but most of all, from having seen those features staring back at him from his bathroom mirror every morning. Minato Namikaze. The Ondaime Hokage. His father. What he felt about him, well, he didn't want to go over that right now. Next to his father, stood a man he didn't recognize, much taller than both his parents. A man with long white hair and an unorthodox Hittite with a kanji for oil inscribed on it. Nope, didn't ring a bell. He moved on. On the wall beside the portrait was a window, opening into the garden at the side, though the years had certainly been unkind to what once might have been a fruit orchard. The tremendous amount of weeds in their length told him that much. The center of the room was occupied by a dining table big enough for 10. And on the final wall was a door that opened up to the kitchen. The kitchen was pretty mundane. Just the way kitchens are supposed to be. Cabinets upon cabinets, and a stove and oven with a window opening into what was once the garden, and connected to the living room. Passing through these rooms quickly, Naruto arrived at the room he really wanted to see. There were 3 doors, 2 of them across the hall from each other, with one dead ahead. One labeled Minato's study, and the other, Naruto's room, with the master bedroom in between. The master bedroom it was then. Excitedly walking in, he found the sheets undone and dust settled everywhere. As if his parents had left in a hurry. He looked around. Above the king-sized bed, was another portrait, this time of only his parents, smiling before the camera. They looked like the happiest couple you could find. On each of the 2 side tables, there were items that revealed further insight into the personalities of his parents. He spent several more minutes going through them, ranging from a photo of what he presumed was his father's Janan team to his mother's makeup supplies. He would have stayed there all day had he not suddenly remembered his appointment with the idiot Uchiha's elder brother he had this afternoon. Hurrying out of there into Naruto's room, he saw something that brought tears to his eyes. The walls all around held tons of decorations, with inscriptions of "Welcome Home, Naruto-kun" all around. Next to the wall opposite the door lay a crib filled with blankets and stuffed toys in every shape and size. My parents truly did want me. He sat there for what felt like an hour, his eyes tearing up until he finally got up and proceeded into the 3rd room. As Naruto entered Minato's study, he came upon a scene of disarray that by far outclassed any other room in the house. A study table loaded with scrolls on things so complicated he couldn't make head or tail of any of them. Sifting through the pile of papers he could make neither head nor tail of, he realized there was nothing that caught his fancy here, so he began to check the drawers. Opening the topmost drawer in the study table, the blind found something that caught his eye. His name. Naruto. It was written on an envelope placed neatly on top of everything else, though the envelope itself showed signs of yellowing over time. The excited blonde immediately snatched it out of its surroundings, and began to examine it. It was addressed to him, that was for certain. To Naruto Namikaze. Ripping it open, he took out the paper inside, which to his surprise, looked just as fresh as if it had been written yesterday. It began, "Dear Naruto. It is with great regret that I must inform you that I will not be able to live my life with you and watch you grow up like I had always hoped. Alas, my duty as Hokage to defend the village and everyone that resides in it supersedes my wish. Given the circumstances with the Kyuubi just a mile out from Konoha, and how suddenly it came about, I hope you will find it in you to forgive me. I don't know how to defend myself, but something has to be done, and I am the only one with the knowledge and power to be able to stop it. I only ask that you not consider it a burden I am placing on you. Rather, think of it as an opportunity for you to utilize one of the most potent and vast chakra reserves the world has seen. Just know that whatever happens, I love and always have. It is my wish that the people of the village will regard you as a hero and really come to respect for the service you do them every day, by holding back the Kyuubi from escaping. I'm leaving this letter with your mother, sealed so that it will not erode, and will only open to your touch, and no one else. Your father, Namikaze Minato. P.S. If your mom is being overprotective and not letting you study some of the more interesting jutsu, here's a spare key to the library behind the shelf. Enjoy. Reading through the letter one, then once more, then a 3rd time, any misgivings he had about his father just disappeared. But it seems his father had miscalculated, for his mother had died during the Kyuubi attack, leaving the blonde Jinchuriki to fend for himself in this cruel world. Nevertheless, he now had a house, a place where he felt he could belong, even though he couldn't live here. He now had a home. Having read through the letter addressed to him, and having resolved the pent-up frustration he had been feeling for quite a while, Naruto fished through the envelope once more to reveal a mundane-looking key. He knew what it was for. Without further ado, the blonde walked over to the shelf behind the desk, observing the books stacked up on it. This agglomeration of books, scrolls, pamphlets and the like covered the entire shelf, with titles ranging from Introductory Chakra Theory to History of the Land of Fire. Giving the titles a once-over, the curious blonde realized that most of the things here could also be easily found at the Konoha Public Library. In fact, aside from several tomes on advanced chakra control, he had probably gone through most of the stuff here over the past several months. He realized that there were no scrolls detailing any jutsu of any kind. So this bookshelf is just a decoy. Huh? The real library is somewhere else. Or as Dad's letter said, behind the shelf. Walking over to the narrow strip behind the shelf, which he noticed was completely hidden from the door, Naruto found himself facing a segment of the wall with nothing but a knocker on it. Lifting the knocker to knock, he noticed what would pass as a keyhole behind it. And bingo! Inserting the key in the keyhole, Naruto walked into what must have been any bibliophile's dream come true. Racks upon racks of knowledge, divided according to category and subject matter, with sections dedicated to Fuin Jutsu, ninjutsu, chakra theory, history, medicine, natural science and whatnot. Walking over to the desk situated in the middle, our resident Jinchuriki jumped into this proverbial well of knowledge. A raven-haired boy with onyx eyes glared at the young man before him, beads of perspiration lining his brow. Aside from standing a head taller than him, and the trademark troughs running down his face, his opponent bore great resemblance to the boy. With the same eyes and hair color, though he had it long and tied into a ponytail, he stood in a relaxed posture, none of his appearance betraying the past hour of sparring he had undergone, unlike his younger adversary. "That's quite enough sparring for today, Sasuke," the elder boy said as he walked away from the center of the field. Evidently displeased, Sasuke followed, joining the group of youngsters that stood nearby. "Excellent work today, guys," the older brother continued. "I see improvement in each of you," pointing one by one to the two standing next to Sasuke. One was a blue-eyed blonde boy with a set whisker marks framing his cheeks, while the other was a raven-haired girl that looked only marginally older than the other two. "Can't we train longer today, Itachi-ni? It's a holiday tomorrow and we're done with all of our homework for the weekend," the girl whined. "Yeah, I mean we've still got a lot of stamina to burn," exclaimed the blonde ball of sunshine named Naruto. "Kiyomi-chan, Naruto-kun. If the two of you would settle down, there is something new I want to start teaching you guys," Itachi explained, motioning the passionate ninja in training to calm down. "Naruto-kun, you remember I told you about chakra natures and a shinobi's affinity for them?" "Yup. An affinity refers to which of the 5 chakra natures a person's chakra inherently leans towards, and it also signifies which element he would be most easily proficient in. A proper textbook definition." "I'm impressed. So do you also remember how to identify an affinity in shinobi?" I think it was some sort of awesome paper thing." And all of that impression of genius that he had built up over the past minute deflated back to zero. Nevertheless, nodding at the somewhat accurate though highly inarticulate response, Itachi extended his hand into his pocket to reveal a small envelope, which upon opening showed a stack of palm-sized papers. "Here, each of you take one. I think it's about time that your natures were determined and your training adjusted accordingly," as he handed out a piece each to the kids respectively. It had been several weeks since Naruto first met Itachi at the Uchiha compound, and since then, he had become a regular sight there on weekends, and a frequent visitor otherwise. He would often come here to train and make use of the expansive training grounds, often ending in a spar with Sasuke, who had taken Naruto to be a rival to measure his progress against. On weekends, Sasuke's elder brother, Itachi, who was a captain in the Anbu Black Ops, would be free and join in with the two, sparring with them, guiding them and offering advice when he felt the need. Occasionally, Uchiha Kiyomi, Sasuke's second cousin and 1 year their senior, would also train with them, seeing how the two of them were far more advanced than most their age. It was on one such occasion 2 weeks earlier that she had been introduced to Naruto, and from then on, the three had formed a group that met nearly every day, hone their skills as shinobi. "I want each of you to channel chakra to your chakra papers like you would for the leaf balancing exercise. The outcome depends on each of your chakra natures. For fire, it'll burn. For wind, it'll tear in half. For lightning, it'll crumple up. For earth, it'll be ground to dust, and for water, it'll dampen. Usually people only have one affinity as they start off, but as they grow up and train to become stronger, they may develop an affinity for multiple chakra natures. Anyway, go ahead and channel some chakra into the papers. Let's see. Sasuke, you first. The raven-haired preteen, with a smug look on his face, brought his hand forward, and lo and behold, the chakra paper began to crinkle up, until it had shriveled up to about half its size, and then, suddenly, it burst into flames. The result merely magnified the smirk on his face. A look of surprise marred Itachi's face. Amazing, at such a young age, Sasuke has such a powerful lightning affinity in addition to his fire affinity. It's sad that most Uchiha children are trained in their fire nature by default, without testing for any other dominant affinities they may or may not have. Ha! Beat that, Dobe. Next came Naruto's turn. As he extended his hand, a look of concentration on his face, the chakra paper was suddenly rent asunder in the span of a split second, leaving a set of bewildered onlookers. There was a sign of visible disappointment on the Jinchuriki's face as he realized Sasuke had outdone him in the number of nature affinities he possessed. Itachi, however, who had his Sharingan activated during the test, noticed something peculiar. Walking up to the fallen pieces of paper, he picked them up, raising them up for the rest to see. They were charred, black as soot. It seems that Naruto-kun has a very powerful wind affinity, supplemented by a slight fire affinity. Yatta, I'm awesome. It's peculiar though. The lack of a flame signifies that your fire affinity is recessive, and hasn't yet been developed much. This needs some further looking into. It may be that this is the cause of your highly explosive fireballs. You don't have a dominant affinity for fire, nor do you possess sufficient mastery over it. In addition, you lack the chakra control required to compensate for either. Nevertheless, Kiyomi-chan, please go ahead. As it turned out, Kiyomi, like the other two, and like most other Uchiha children, had a fire affinity, though any significant secondary affinity was absent at the moment. Having tested the three of them and discovered their affinities, Itachi coughed out loud to gain their attention. Now that you guys know which element you each have an affinity for, it's paramount that you begin to train your mastery over the elements you have an affinity for. Try to learn jutsu that correspond to your respective elements, as they will be stronger than other elements and will come to you easier and more naturally. What about me, Itachi-ni? Exclaimed an exuberant Whisker Face. I have a wind, but I've already started practicing with fire techniques. And they come out fine. Naruto-kun, when I picked up your sliced chakra paper, I found it burned. This in itself is unusual though, given that there was no fire, meaning a lack of a dominant fire affinity, but a recessive one, which seems to be leaking out. Mind you, recessive affinities don't show themselves unless they have been trained, whereas the dominant affinity hasn't. So does that mean I can still train in fire techniques? He questioned hopefully. Yes, rather you'd better. Unless you do so, controlling your wind chakra will become nigh impossible. You must learn to be able to separate its leaking influence from when you don't intend to use it, else it will penetrate other uses of your chakra. A blank face stared back at him. Yes, he had gone overboard. It seems that's enough for today. Kiyomi-chan, your brother has come to pick you up. We'll meet again next week. Hopefully you'll all have found an elemental jutsu you want to learn by then. Just then, an above-average height man with short unkempt dark-colored hair stepped into the clearing. Ni-san. You're back from your mission to Taki? When did you arrive? The girl squealed as she leapt to embrace her brother. An hour ago at most. Done exchanging pleasantries with his sister, the man turned to the remainder of the occupants of the training field. Sasuke-kun, Naruto-kun, I see you guys have been training pretty hard today. I hope Itachi isn't driving you guys too hard? Seeing the sweat drops on each of their faces, he realized he had gotten his answer. Itachi took advantage of the momentary lull in conversation to step forward. Naruto-kun, remember that discussion we had about the new optional apprenticeship? Flashback. Itachi-ni. You're a powerful Jounin ninja, right? I guess. Well, since today was the first day of our third year at the academy, Iruka-sensei said that anyone who wishes can miss the afternoon compulsory practice sessions if they get an apprenticeship under a Chunin level ninja or above. The person you're apprenticed to would then have to vouch for you and confirm that you're training at the designated times and adept at any and all of the skills that were taught in classes and were meant to be reinforced during the practice sessions. Yes, I know about the new policy Hokage-sama passed last week. Sasuke has been going on about how he wants to be my apprentice enough times for it to be impossible that I forget. So you'll be my sensei? You're the best. Shouting out for joy. Why do you want to become an apprentice, Naruto-kun? It's gonna be awesome. And I won't have to go to the practice sessions anymore. Oh god, he just wants to skive off classes. Naruto-kun. This apprenticeship was meant mostly for clan children or others who have special skills that they need to learn, usually skills that the academy instructors are not acquainted with. You would be better off learning from your instructors. But the instructors at the academy never teach me anything. They only tell me I'm no good and should drop from the program completely. I see. I'll see what I can do. So does that mean you accept? No, unfortunately, with my duties as an Anbu commander, as well as voluntary work for the military police, I don't have time to take up any pupils. I even had to reject Sasuke, who is now gonna learn from Ota-sama. Ate excited look in the blonde's eyes deflated at hearing that, and he began to turn away. Seeing the visibly dejected look, he added, however, I'll see if I can do something about your situation. End flashback. Naruto-kun, remember that discussion we had about the new optional apprenticeship? It had been almost a month since that conversation. Yes, of course. Well, I've spoken with Kiyomi-chan's brother, and he's willing to become your sensei for this year. In fact, that's why he came here today. Really, Shisui-ni? The sparkle in the boy's eyes returned in full force as he questioned the latest arrival. You'll make me your apprentice? Sure, I have the time, so why not? Unlike some people, I don't spend all my time at work. Looking to the other Jounin ninja, you're the best, Shisui-ni. As he hugged the elder man, by the side, a young girl stood glaring enviously. Ni-san, how come you never made me your apprentice? She raged. Well, the new policy was just passed this week, meaning it applied to this year's third-year batch. The girl didn't seem to buy his excuse, it seemed. Oh shoot, it was probably announced for the fourth-year batch as well. Seeing the no-bullshit face he got in response, Shisui added, plus, you never asked. Well, I'm asking now then. Will you make me your apprentice, Ni-san? In that sweet tone of voice that sent shivers down any man's spine. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. This was exemplified now as the Uchiha genius could not help but nod along to his kid sister's wishes. Well, that's that. Both of you need to write up an apprenticeship application and get it signed by me before this becomes official. Until then, no skipping classes, Naruto. And there went his mood for the rest of the day. As they all retired back to their homes, Itachi was left alone to contemplate the results of the day's session. Naruto-kun is turning out to be quite interesting. A leaking fire affinity could only mean that it is inherited. A very powerful gene for the fire affinity has been passed down to him, though being diluted over generations again and again till it is no longer the dominant one. I must look into this further. Nevertheless, I hope Naruto-kun will turn out to be the rival that Sasuke needs to reach his true potential. That incentive that will keep pushing him to further heights, to grow stronger and stronger. It may be that one day, their friendship will be the one to redeem the Uchiha clan and Konoha. To bring them together, and unite them once more. Like how it was back before Madara went rogue and cursed the rest of the clan to isolation, suspicion and decline. It had been 2 weeks since Naruto had begun his apprenticeship under the famed shinobi, Uchiha Shisui. In these 2 weeks, he had settled into a routine, where he would wake up early every morning and study from the scrolls he had salvaged from the library in his parents' home. Leaving home at around 7, he would go to his training ground and practice on his own as advised by his sensei. This mostly comprised of ninjutsu training, endurance drills and numerous katas that Shisui had him ingrained into his subconscious muscle memory. In fact, his taijutsu was, in Shisui's opinion, the single most crucial aspect of his training that required attention at the moment. Flashback. So, Naruto-kun, it's time we got our training started, but first, I need to know what level you're at. So, come at me with everything you've got, Shisui said as he adopted a lax but defensible pose. Getting into a stance he had seen other students and teachers at the academy use, with both hands balled into fists and raised upwards in front of him, Naruto stood his ground. For all of 1 second, neither combatant moved, and then, Naruto charged. Starting off with an uppercut aimed at Shisui's jaw, Naruto missed as his adversary took a step back. Swinging back again for another attempt, this time coming from the right, Shisui ducked underneath the attack and kicked his opponent away, leaving him flying away, only to crash into a trash can so conveniently placed at the edge of the field, littering its contents on the grass and on the blonde himself as he rolled to a stop. Grimy and covered in slime, the test continued on for 5 more minutes until Naruto decided he was far too outclassed to win using any conventional method. Realizing that if he wanted to stand a chance, he would have to put his creativity to the test, he came up with an idea. Rather, it was similar to the strategy he had already successfully executed against the ridiculously overpowered Lee kid with the green spandex jumpsuit and hideous eyebrows that bore great resemblance to living caterpillars. Bending low towards the ground, Naruto spun around in a circle, ensuring that Shisui would have to either immediately back off or jump up off of the ground. As expected, it was the latter that Shisui adopted, leaving his safe place on the ground in place of backing away from an academy student. This moment, however, was what his student had been waiting for, and running through a set of hand seals he had practiced hundreds of times before, Naruto raised his hands to his mouth, blowing out with all the power of a hurricane. However, Shisui too had not been lying idle as he descended back to the earth. He too quickly went through those hand seals, copying Naruto's every move as he raised his hands to his face, finishing simultaneously, Fu-Uten, Date-Appa. Fu-Uten, Date-Appa. The elder man's jutsu pushed though the Jinchurikis, knocking the air out of him as it blew him into the ground. Standing up in a daze, he growled in frustration. I was absolutely sure I had him this time. There was no way for him to dodge, and not enough time to perform a jutsu unless he already knew what I was going to do in advance. Unless. That's it. He knew what jutsu I was going to use because of his Sharingan. Hey, I'm just an academy student, how come you're using your Sharingan against me? What makes you think I'm using my Sharingan? My eyes are as black as ever. Grunting at his failure after he thought he had cornered his enemy, Naruto charged once more, forgetting all about strategizing and finesse. Rushing straight towards his opponent, the blonde swung his fist forwards, aiming for the stomach. Shisui, though, just remained standing there until just when Naruto's fist reached his stomach, he vanished, leaving neither trace nor smoke. Looking behind himself, Naruto found it was too late as Shisui bonked him lightly with the butt of his kunai. He lay there for a couple seconds before his vision cleared enough for him to stand up. That's enough, Naruto-kun. This spar is over. A certain blonde didn't seem to be too happy about that though, and his facial expressions appeared to be articulating that very thought. Let's analyze your fight and see what you did right and what you did wrong. First of all, I'll start by saying that maneuver you just pulled there at the end was marvelous. It was overall a good strategy, and would work on most Shinin and even novice Chunin. However, most experienced shinobi have come to expect such tricks and are prepared for them. So the reason why I was able to overcome it was because I had noticed your hands going into position for hand seals. Even without the Sharingan, most Uchiha have very keen eyesight and their optical synapses are wired for very high-speed reflexes. As a result, since I knew what jutsu you were using, given that your affinity is for the wind element and that is a fundamental jutsu that any wind user learns, I raced through the same hand seals, not copying yours, rather knowing which ones were to follow. For any shinobi, speed is of the essence, and it is usually the faster shinobi that has the advantage in a fight. Since I finished my hand seals a fraction of a second before you, I launched the Date-Appa slightly before yours, not giving it enough time to mature and build up momentum. Nevertheless, I'm quite impressed with this part of the spar. The little tidbits of praise that could be found here and there in that lengthy explanation might have brightened up the blonde's day, had it not been for what followed. Your taijutsu, however, was absolutely abysmal. There was no form to it. You would push your entire weight behind each blow, overextending yourself in the process, leaving yourself wide open for any and all counterattacks. You probably only managed to defeat your peers because of their own inexperience and your slight speed and power advantage over them. However, any experienced taijutsu user would know when you haven't covered all your bases and capitalize on it, taking advantage of your vulnerability. And he couldn't have been a bit nicer about it now, could he? Having said that, have no worries. The entire purpose of this apprenticeship is so that you could cement the concepts that you learn in the academy, and in your case, learn them from scratch. From tomorrow onwards, I need you to practice several basic taijutsu katas I'll be providing you, and then maybe we'll move on to selecting a suitable style for you. Flashback end. After finishing off his morning training, Naruto would go to the academy, where he would tend to fall asleep during most of the classes, especially the theory ones. A lot of the history, Naruto had surprisingly already read about in his search for rare jutsu over the past year, and especially after his discovery of the Uzumaki clan and his relation to it, he had devoted quite some time to reading up on its history and that of the clans and villages associated with it. Chakra theory, he was just average at, and he would usually get the hang of the material that was covered in class, given that he wasn't asleep or kicked out for some reason or the other. Among his teachers, most would glare at him and go out of their way to make life difficult for the blonde and giving him the cold shoulder on the best of days. One teacher, though, was completely indifferent to him, neither hating him, nor paying him much attention, especially ever since he had stopped playing pranks on him almost a year ago. His name was Umino Iruka. What Naruto excelled at, as far as the academy syllabus was concerned, was weapons. This included both hitting stationary and moving targets, as well as being able to dodge incoming projectiles at a very short notice. In fact, in the afternoon sessions he had with Shisui, That is what the two focused on. Shisui had realized quite early on that not only were Naruto's reflexes quite sharp, his eyesight and senses were well above average. Besides Sasuke, none in his class could outdo him when it came to weapon throwing, and due to his experiences evading vengeful villagers in his youth, not even Sasuke could dodge quite as well he could. After the weapons class, he would go to the introductory chakra control class, where he fared worst of all. Despite paying full attention, as Shisui had stressed greatly on its importance, and trying just as much as the rest of the class, until the day before, he still ranked near the bottom of his year. Flashback. Naruto grunted in frustration as the leaf refused, for the umpteenth time, to stick to his forehead. As part of his class assignment, he along with the rest of the class had to practice balancing a leaf while having it stick to their forehead by use of chakra. Why doesn't this freaking work? What am I doing wrong? You're using too much chakra, which is natural for Jinchuriki such as yourself. In order to avoid repelling the leaf from your body, you must regulate the flow of chakra so that it is much less than what you're currently putting out. Your chakra coils are just so large that you require an equal amount of effort to control it. This is necessary before you move on to learning ninjutsu. Why do I need to decrease my chakra? I can do ninjutsu just fine without it. I've already mastered earth and water clones, futon, daitappa, and kaden, gokakyu no jutsu. Also, I'm working on futon, repushu, that's scale palm if you don't know, in order to supplement my weapon skills. All of that is true, however, despite your large stamina, constant use of ninjutsu tires you, and by learning chakra control, you can increase the number of times you can use the same jutsu before you exhaust yourself. Also, given a certain amount of chakra, you can make your jutsu bigger, wider and more destructive. On the other hand, you can also make your jutsu more subtle, quiet and capable of taking out your enemies without them even realizing it. That impressive list of benefits of chakra control did away with the blonde's whiny face and sent him right back to work again. So all I have to do is decrease the amount of chakra, right? Pretty much. Flashback end. That was yesterday. Finally knowing what it was he was doing wrong, he had seen marked improvement from before, though it must be said that Rome wasn't built in a day. After his chakra control classes, he would be free to go home and train with Shisui-sensei. He would practice chakra control, weapons training and hone his ninjutsu. After that, the two would spar with taijutsu only for half an hour. Sometimes, he would meet up with Sasuke and Kiyomi at the Uchiha clan compound to spar with them. In a no-holds-barred contest, Naruto could very well hold his own against the two of them, making use of diversionary tactics, ninjutsu and sheer strength to make up for his still lacking taijutsu form. Today was a Friday, and like most weekdays when the busy shinobi was available, after finishing up with the academy, Naruto was practicing with Shisui. Tossing out the dulled shuriken he had gotten from the academy, he yelled, "Futon, repushu," expelling air from his palm to augment the speed and power with which the shuriken were thrown. Naruto managed to hit the crow he had been trying to hit for the past week. Akira, the crow had been summoned by Shisui to fly around and evade Naruto's throws, and despite his excellent aim the crow had proven to be quite elusive. "Bravo, Naruto," the dark-haired man remarked as he clapped his hands in applause. "I think it's finally time we begin training your wind element chakra." Woohoo! What you must remember is that wind chakra is one of the most powerful offensive elements out there. Its effects range from powerful blunt force attacks to precise slicing blades that can cut through most anything. To begin, pick up a leaf, hold it between your palms and try to cut it in two using only your chakra. If you meet with very limited success, then try to mold chakra while placing your hands in the hand seal for dog, then go on with the exercise. It tends to help, since the dog hand seal is most used for wind jutsu. After finishing up with his daily practice, Naruto set off on his way back home, leaving behind an intrigued Uchiha, staring at his retreating figure. I wonder if Itachi has received the test results yet. It's been almost 3 days now. It's pretty likely though that our theory is correct. I mean, what else could Naruto be? Given all the signs, I'm pretty sure they're gonna be positive. XXXXX. Given his lack of any home life, on any other day, he might have gone to chill out and watch clouds with Shikamaru or race with Kiba or even train with Sasuke, but today was special. Today was the day of the Kyuubi festival. Today marked the anniversary of the day the Yondaime Hokage defeated the demon fox and sealed it in his gut, cursing him to a lifetime of hate. Today was his birthday. This day marked 1 whole year since he had found out about his tenant. 1 whole year since his first kill, 1 whole year since he stopped caring about the village, the Hokage, the villagers, his teachers and pretty much everyone else that refused to give him the time of the day. In fact, apart from a select few, which included the Uchiha he was friends with, a handful of his classmates which he could count on one finger, the Akirakas, and others like Kakashi, Guy, and Lee, his relationship with practically everyone else had evolved into nothing more than a formal one, and he was happy to keep things that way. Since that first day, he had not really been attacked like that again, though there had been 2 or 3 isolated incidents in the time between. One time he had been able to escape any and all confrontation entirely, but the other time he was faced with a drunken Chunin, who he had no choice but to fight. Taking advantage of the fact he was a drunk whose reflexes and sensory perception had been dulled by a night's worth of alcohol, he had been able to trounce him with some of the traps he had grown proficient in setting during his pranking days. The rest is left up to pure taijutsu, the precious little that he did know, leaving the man unconscious in a random alley in the red light district of Konoha. Thankfully, since the man was drunk, he had no memory of the events that transpired the previous night. Regardless, he had expected a similar event to occur today, so he had decided to return home early today, locking his doors and windows, while trapping the periphery of the apartment lest there be some uninvited guests that come knocking on the door. Having done that, he returned to leafing through the notes on introductory Fuuinjutsu he had salvaged from his father's library. A very useful composition on the topic was written by the Sanin Jiraiya titled, Fuuinjutsu for Dummies, where the basics leading up to intermediate and complex elements of the art were explained in a largely practical manner such that students who were not prodigies as such when it came to abstract concepts and theories. In fact, Naruto had learned much from this book, and had grasped most of the basics of Fuuinjutsu, taking to it like a fish to water. Over the past month, Naruto had gone from someone who barely knew what sealing meant to someone who could easily prepare basic sealing scrolls, explosive notes, proximity alarms and chakra inhibitors. Barrier jutsu, he was still learning. Regardless, time passed by, and Naruto lost himself to his perusal of the Toad Sage's remarkable text on Fuuinjutsu. It was only while he was having his homemade 2-minute ramen for dinner, that the sound of boisterous laughing invaded the silence that permeated the apartment for hours. Peeking outside the window, he noticed round about a dozen men carrying pitchforks and knives lining his doorway. A smirk crept onto his face as they approached, having no idea they were walking into the den of a lion. No longer would the Jinchuriki bear with the villagers and their stupidity. No longer would he tolerate those idiots and the sorry excuse for a brain they possessed. No, from now on, he would give what he took, and he would repay just what he received. Today onwards would be. As the large group of men approached the apartment from outside, a smirk of epic proportions appeared on Naruto's face. It was a mere matter of seconds before the first proximity ward came into effect, raining down a batch of kunai upon the wretched soul who had first triggered the apartment's defense mechanisms. Those following behind the apparent leader could do nothing but watch as he was riddled with the ninja knives, downing him on the spot. However, due to a combination of the years of bottled-up vengeance and of course, the not-so-little amounts of alcohol that had been consumed, rather than warning them of the doom they were about to submit themselves to, the horrible bloody sight of what was now the kunai-riddled corpse did nothing but further fuel their rage, lowering their inhibitions even further. Most of the men had suffered loss at the hands of the Kyuubi attack over a decade ago. Some had lost parents, others children, others siblings. Some had lost their wives, some had lost their friends. Many had lost their homes. Others had lost their businesses. In fact, there was barely a household in all of Konoha that hadn't been affected. To them, this day was a constant reminder of all that they had lost, and the Jinchuriki boy was no different. Some were stupid enough to believe he was in fact the Kyuubi. Others felt that he would lose control any minute and feared a repeat of what happened 11 years ago. Most of Konoha though, simply despised him as a living reminder of what had once been, and how it had so abruptly and without warning, come to an end, snatched away into the far reaches of the afterlife, bringing them to despair of ever reuniting with what or whom they had coveted most. The remaining men threw all caution to the wind as they charged as one, making for the door. On the way, 2 more unfortunate souls fell prey to the traps, incrementing by 2, the number of dead porcupines in the elemental nations. As the lead figure reached the doorway and tested the doorknob, lock-breaking apparatus in hand, something peculiar took place. The door swung open without a hitch. The demon didn't even lock the door. He must have realized how futile it would be. As the leader entered, so too did his minions. With the remainder of the men having entered the apartment, the door slammed shut behind them. The lights were off and the entire room plunged into darkness. "I can't see, somebody light a match, it's awfully dark in here." And so, our resident Jinchuriki's nighttime assailants stumbled around in the darkness for several minutes, until finally, one of them managed to fish out a lighter from his pocket. Flicking it on, they realized that it was woefully insufficient. They could just barely make out the outlines of the room and each other's faces. They scrambled around in silence for a bit more, trying to search for a door leading into the interior of the apartment, where their prey resided. The momentary silence, though, was shattered by an unearthly scream as one of their number collapsed to the ground. Turning the miniature light source in his direction, they found him spasming on the ground, his limbs jerking violently as a spray of blood was pumping out of his barely attached neck. His jugular had been cut. "No, Hiroshi! Somebody help!" But it was in vain. Nothing could be done. Severe loss of blood pressure as the man's life fluid gushed out onto the floor quickly shut down the brain, sending him into unconsciousness. He would be dead in another minute. Panic began to set in, as the man who had called for help tried to drag his friend out of the house. Aside from the 2 or 3 fanatically hateful members of the group who continued onwards, the rest felt that killing the demon container wasn't worth losing their lives over like the 4 of their number that had so far been slaughtered without mercy. Half of those that remained now began to sober up, the death of a third of their group catalyzing the eventual awakening from their drunken stupor. As the men scrambled to escape, carrying their dying comrades along with them, they were jolted into immobility once more as another spine-chilling howl resounded around them, signifying the demise of another accomplice. For several seconds, they stood like that, frozen in place. Then they ran, dropping all their luggage, be it animate or dead. The only thought on their mind was to save their lives. Until, one after the other, the intruders each ran into a wall, blocking their way out. A wall that, if they remembered correctly, and they had their bearings right, hadn't been there moments before. Just then, a flare of dazzling white light flooded the room, revealing to all what they had walked into. XXXXX. Naruto Uzumaki, or should he say, Namikaze, felt quite ambivalent concerning the events that had unfolded over the past half an hour. When he had first noticed the group of intruders approaching his door, he had felt nothing. Annoyed maybe, but not hurt or saddened in any way. He should have though, and 2 years prior, he would have. After all, he had tried so hard to earn recognition in the village of his birth, and despite his utmost efforts, he had been consistently rebuked. He had received no appreciation for the work that had anyone else put into their studies, they would have garnered widespread acclaim among its residents. In contrast, the villagers' hate continued to fester, manifesting itself in the demon hunts that were not so uncommon during his youth. He should have been saddened immensely. However, that phase had passed. He had grown to expect the villagers' reaction, and schooled his emotions to react accordingly. No longer would he be driven to tears as a result of what others felt or thought about him. Whoever left him well alone, he would not bother with. Whoever transgressed against him, he would repay the favor multifold. And so it was that a dozen transgressors entered his field of divination. None would he permit to live through the night. One by one 3 fell to the traps he had set up outside, leaving the door open. Once he was sure they had all entered the house, he began to spring his trap in earnest. Several earth clones that he had positioned in the living room lay hidden, awaiting the perfect time to strike, while Naruto himself went through a chain of hand seals, finally ending with his hands slamming into the floor of the apartment, an array of seals spreading from the point of contact. Barrier erected, the blonde stood up. 2 more screams he had heard in the meanwhile signified that his clones had been hard at work. The rest, he would deal with personally. He had already flipped off the circuit breakers quite some time ago, leaving his enemies floundering in the dark. He, on the other hand, could see them well enough to be able to pick them off, one after the other. Whether this was a result of the years he had spent on full alert, through night and day, especially when he was younger and couldn't defend himself, a side effect of having the QB sealed in his gut, or whether he was just that awesome, he didn't know. Regardless, his keen eyes allowed him to easily slaughter his enemies without any need for turning the lights on, as evidenced by the panic his clones had created. But where was the fun in that? He wanted to see his would-be tormentors suffer. He wanted to see the looks of fear on their faces, just as they would delight in his suffering back when he was weak, helpless. He flicked on the lights, stunning the remainder of the men into inaction. They, for the first time that day, saw the face of the demon they had come to slay. If that wasn't enough, they could see the red transparent barrier that had been erected around them, cutting off any and all hopes of escape. It had been a mistake coming here, and they knew it. Before Naruto could enter into what would surely be a one-sided encounter, his proximity wards gave warning that someone else was approaching his door. Someone with a sizable chakra signature. He of course knew who it was. After all, he had been sensing this particular signature for over a month now. Knowing now that he had no more time to play with his prey, Naruto advanced onto the remaining men. Some resisted, while others merely cowered in the rear. As one after the other, they were each cut down like flies. Stepping over the last of the corpses, his boots plunging the kunai poking out of its abdomen even further in, he wiped his bloody hands on his clothes, as he walked up to meet the latest intruder into his home. He was obviously male, with an evident lack of hair anywhere near his shoulders, let alone below that, standing at an average height, i.e., about a head and a half taller than the blonde. He wore a gray Konoha flak jacket over black clothes, along with metal gauntlets and gloves. On his back, there was a tanto, sheathed, though easily accessible for a quick draw. However, his most distinctive feature by far, was the porcelain mask that covered his face from the Jinchuriki. This mask however, failed to hide who this was from him. He had after all, been throwing him off of his trail for over a month by now. The familiar bear mask made it clear that this was the self-same operative come to mess with his life once more. Naruto knew why he was here. His proximity wards had sensed his presence long ago. He was after, standing guard over the Jinchuriki. However, that role of his did not compel him to stop the intruders at his door, nor deal with them as any law enforcement officer would be expected to. He had bided his time outside, leaving his ward to the mercy of the would-be assassins, only entering upon hearing their screams, realizing that it was too much to hope that mere civilians would be able to off the demon container, the one who held the bane of his existence in his abdomen. 30. Bear was a loyal shinobi of Konoha. He loved the village, and he would give his life for it. He was born in a middle-class family of merchants, who had a thriving business that supported them. He was an only son, so his parents had spoiled him much, getting him whatever he wanted, even if they had to stretch their pockets to do so. They had loved him, and he them. In other words, life had been perfect. Until the demon attacked. The fox had appeared without warning, spreading mayhem and unparalleled destruction throughout the village, though most of it concentrated around the peripheral parts, which was where his parents and their shop were. They hadn't stood a chance. Everything he had known in life had been ripped away from him, leaving him an orphan with nowhere to go. While he agonized in his loss, the demon and its container walked free, weaving an illusion of innocence wherever it went. His heart would boil over at that thought. No one felt the need to deal with the demon. Nobody realized that the damage that the village had taken at the hands of the Kyuubi 11 years ago could very well be repeated once more if the demon decided to show its true colors. The security of Konoha was at stake, and more importantly his sweet cold vengeance was at stake. He had decided to become a ninja. Despite being late for the standard enrollment, he had managed to worm his way in and unlock his chakra, though it was later than most. He had graduated at the middle of his class, and despite a lack of any ninja background like the rest of the toppers in his class, managed to keep going out of sheer willpower, and it was that very quality that allowed him into the Onbu. Currently, his orders were the following. Watch over the demon's house, and if approached by the villagers, allow them some liberty. If they manage to overcome and injure Naruto, then make sure he doesn't die, and bring him back to the hospital. On the other hand, if he manages to escape their attempt on his life, try to keep them alive and put a stop to the fighting. He, however, had his own plans. The Sandaime had gone soft, too soft for his own good and far too soft for the good of Konoha. He had to take matters into his own hands. He had gone to one of the elders who opposed the Hokage for his weakness and inaction and spilled his heart out to him. The wise and esteemed elder had agreed with him and encouraged him. Together, they had made the perfect plan to fulfill his vengeance. While he would somehow get rid of the demon, who was still an academy student, and pin it on him, claiming that the container had attacked him without warning and he had merely defended himself from the already highly injured Jinchuriki, the elder would keep the Hokage occupied so as to make sure he doesn't get a chance to look into his crystal ball and see what actually took place. When the villagers arrived at the apartment, Bear had been ready. A minute later when 3 of them had been perforated with a hail of kunai and shuriken, leaving him no time or even opportunity to save the brave villagers, he had been quite shocked. The Jinchuriki, before today had never, to his knowledge, displayed any homicidal tendencies, nor had he booby-trapped his apartment before. Today had been a first. He wanted to go in and save the rest, but he waited. Continuing the mission won out over saving the villagers. It was for the greater good after all. Besides, once they got into close range, the demon wouldn't be as lucky as he had been. An academy student, while being experienced with projectile weapons, was nowhere good enough at taijutsu to fend off a dozen grown men. All in good time. It was a couple minutes later when he heard their screams and the sounds of panicked footsteps moving around that he raced for the door. Something wasn't right and he intended to make it so. Upon finding the door locked, he checked for the windows, which to his relief, had not been blocked somehow. Kicking it in, he shattered the glass into uncountable pieces, while his boots prevented them from piercing him. Jumping in, he found 2 men standing their ground before the monster, while the rest were no more than bodies strewn across the floor, trails of blood leading away from them, indicating that they had been cut down while bleeding out as they escaped. Encompassing this entire scene was a wall of red, which though transparent, was sufficient to indicate its status as a barrier of some sort. Cautiously, Bear approached the barrier, tossing a kunai at it while standing at a safe distance. To his surprise, it penetrated the barrier without facing any resistance, as if nothing was there. Shocked, he himself slowly walked up to it and eased himself in. It was as easy as that dash? The brat's foolish attempts at self-preservation apparently failed. Meanwhile, Naruto had dispatched the remainder of the men, leaving just the two of them standing inside the seemingly failed barrier. None of the men were left alive, he had made sure of that. As the two figures stared each other down, they knew that the moment of truth had come. There would be no diplomacy here. The blonde knew that the Anbu was here on orders from the Hokage. The Anbu knew that the demon was getting stronger with each day that passed and the danger to the village was increasing exponentially. "You demon! What have you done?" Bear shouted, enraged that the villagers had died in vain. There was not a scratch on the Jinchuriki's body, nor was he tired by the least bit. The villagers, who had shared his own sentiments, his own loss, had been of absolutely no service to the Leaf, despite laying down their lives for a most noble cause. Not waiting for or expecting a response, Bear sprinted up to the blonde, spinning in midair to open up with a flying spin kick. His opponent, however, had the cognition to jump back, avoiding his attack and putting some distance between himself and the man. Wasting no time, Bear continued, jumping forwards once more. Leaping to the side, Naruto replied with a handful of shuriken aimed at the spot the Anbu would land at. Seeing the oncoming ninja stars, the man withdrew a kunai from his weapon's pouch, aiming to deflect the projectiles. What he didn't know was that Naruto had augmented the shuriken with a favorite technique of his, Fuuten, Repushu. The additional velocity and momentum that the projectiles had gained was more than enough to elude the newly recruited Anbu's perception, stabbing him in 5 different places on his body. 2 pierced his right arm, while the others landed on his torso. He enhanced their speed and penetration power with chakra. He's stronger than I thought. All the more reason to take him out while we still can. Giving out a shout of pain, he steeled himself, as he prepared to up the gears a little but. He had underestimated the brat's capabilities, and it had cost him the mobility of his arm. Though nothing vital had been hit, he was still at a serious disadvantage. Knowing that playtime was over, Bear drew his danto with his left hand. Though he was right-handed by nature, he had trained himself to be able to wield a sword with both hands. Adopting the stance he had been perfecting since back when he was a Genin, he waited for his opponent to make his move. Naruto, on the other hand, had been training under Shisui Uchiha for some time now, and if anything, the most important lesson he had drilled into the blonde's head was the virtue of patience. To be able to feel your enemy out without exposing yourself to risk was an essential quality for any successful shinobi, though most spirited youngsters failed to comprehend it. This was a lesson he had needed to hammer in quite forcefully. One thing that he did know was this. He was facing an Anbu, no matter how inexperienced or unimpressive he may seem, he couldn't afford to hold back. If he did, he would be making the same mistake his opponent did, and that wouldn't bode well for the young ninja in training. He knew that he would never be able to outskill someone vastly senior to him so soon. He knew that his chances lay in the element of surprise, and the fact that his opponent would underestimate him. That was what he needed to capitalize on. Secondly, he would play to his strengths. Having already injured him right from the beginning, he merely needed to draw out the fight long enough for the blood loss to be a significantly decisive factor in the fight. The operative, having lost mobility in his right arm, didn't hurt either. Summoning up a mud clone, the two blondes began a charge against Bear. Engaging in hand-to-hand was a no-no, especially seeing the flashing sword their opponent was waving around. Both drew a kunai each and went in. A series of back-and-forth strikes ensued, continuing on for about 5 minutes, before the first blood. Despite his caution, it was the original that took the first hit. As the tando descended onto his head, he dodged to the right, but he wasn't fast enough though, and the sword lodged itself in his shoulder, sinking into flesh like a hot knife in butter, striking bone. The bastard was channeling chakra through his blade. By the time his clone managed to kick away his adversary, he had received another slash to his chest, which, though not quite as deep, was bleeding profusely. Naruto could no longer cope with close-range combat. One of his clones stationed outside the barrier saw that, and immediately substituted out with him, allowing the original some relief as the Anbu was left to deal with his two clones. On the Jinchuriki's command, one more of his clones entered into the barrier, offering further distraction to the blonde's would-be killer. Bear immediately realized something was wrong when the Naruto he had grievously injured earlier appeared suddenly to be completely unhurt. Looking around, he found what he was searching for outside the fancy walk-through wall, and so he abandoned his fight with the clones and made for his target, lest he should escape his fate. Breaking into a full-out run, he was losing the clones that followed behind him, desperately attempting to arrive in time to save the original, and it appeared that the demon container himself knew this, as instead of having his clones cover his tracks while he escaped, he began to run through a set of hand seals like his life depended on it. It was all in vain though, as Bear would not allow him enough respite to complete them. Clones dead on his heels, he leapt the final 3 yards to his prey when halfway through his flight, he rammed into the red wall that had somehow gone solid. As his head, being hinged on his neck, was jerked backwards, he lost his balance, and in the momentary lapse in special awareness that followed, Naruto's clones had overtaken him, 2 trying to grapple him into submission while the third repeatedly stabbed him in the chest, puncturing his lungs. This couldn't persist for long, as despite his handicap, he was still stronger physically than the academy student, and managed to throw them off and slash at his third attacker, reducing him to a pile of mud, his tanto stuck in the substance. Though his clones had been overpowered in a matter of seconds by the cornered animal, it didn't matter. They had given him and his clone by his side all the time they had needed to prepare their jutsu. Kaden, Gokakyu no Jutsu. Fu Uten, Datappa, they both shouted in unison. Without warning, an inferno of what would seem to be cataclysmic proportions erupted within the barrier, hitting the Anbu operative at point-blank range. For all of a minute, Bear knew nothing but pain, pure unadulterated agony as the unidirectional permeability of the barrier allowed anything to enter, but nothing to exit, leaving the infernal hurricane to rage on within it, neither passing on nor dissipating away as the desperate blonde continued to pour a sea of chakra into his jutsu, cooking him as in a pressure cooker. Then, Bear knew no more. As the immensely destructive conclusion of the battle came to an end, there was no man left standing. The clones inside the barrier stood not a chance in the face of the fearsome firestorm, and the one outside had dispelled halfway through, having exhausted its chakra reserves. Anyone not a Jinchuriki lay dead, while the blonde in question had fallen to the floor, coughing up blood as his injuries had just gotten from really bad to fatally bad, as he continued to bleed out onto the floor. Nobody noticed as the figure hidden in the darkness retreated, having gathered all the info his master had asked for, without having to step in and interfere with the fight. Nobody but the still conscious young boy whose proximity wards the figure had unknowingly breached. XXXXX. Uchiha Shisui had arrived back from a 2-day mission to the capital of Hinokuni just this morning, and after completing some of his own personal training, had chilled out until he had to oversee Naruto's and Kiyomi's training. Somewhat satisfied with his day, he had spent the day with friends, especially given that the village was full of celebration and merrymaking that evening in commemoration of the day that the village had been saved from utter annihilation at the hands of the Kyuubi no Kitsune. Speaking of the Kyuubi, his thoughts wandered over to the human sacrifice that housed the demon fox, isolating its influence from the rest of the village. Over the past month or so, both he and his younger sister Kiyomi had grown quite fond of the boy in question. His jolly mood kept everyone in lively spirits and motivated others to work just as hard as he would. But below that facade, he could sense an ocean of repressed feelings of hate and resentment. A shimmering desire for revenge. He wanted to cleanse him of those desires, though he would admit they were certainly not unwarranted. In fact, he could think of no reason why the Hokage refused to do anything about the unrelentingly malicious behavior that the villagers adopted when dealing with Naruto. Despite the law he had passed years ago, forbidding anyone from spreading word of the Jinchuriki, it had been broken time and time again, yet there was no disciplinary action. Speaking of Naruto, he wondered where he had lost himself at the moment. He knew that there was no place for him at the Kyuubi festival, given his status as its Jinchuriki, and so, he had invited him over to his place for dinner. That was yesterday, and it seemed that he had forgotten. Either that or some unsavory circumstances had come along, preventing him from showing up. Waiting until right before dinner was to be served, and that was saying something. Given that he was used to eating pretty late, he decided to check for himself what the matter was. He couldn't completely rule out the possibility that Naruto was merely depressed and had holed himself up in his apartment for some reason or the other. Setting out for Naruto's apartment in the red light district of the village, he could still see and hear the after effects of the festival. As his destination grew nearer, the signs grew ever clearer. Drunks were out on the streets, even couples out in various states of undress occupied the alleys. To his horror, a gang of 4 men had surrounded a woman, who had a pleading look on her face as they forced themselves on her unclothed form. Shisui, being the gentleman that he was, couldn't stand for this, and in a smokeless sunshine, appeared between them, striking the neck of each into unconsciousness. "Are you okay, miss?" A nod, followed by a set of sobs was all he received in response. It was understandable. She would be undergoing a highly traumatic experience. He gave her his shirt, so as to cover her modesty. With a flare of his chakra, he summoned the nearest Anbu operative in the vicinity. A fox-masked individual appeared in under half a minute. Being an Anbu captain surely had its perks. "These thugs here were found to be raping this young woman here. Please round them up and incarcerate them at HQ. I will deal with them in the morning." "Hi, Taiku." Turning to the woman in question, he inquired, "Where do you live?" Following her silent directions as he escorted her to her home, Shisui found himself standing right across from a very familiar apartment building. After all, this was the very place he would often drop off an exhausted blonde after hours of rigorous training. What a coincidence. Convenient too. Dropping her off, he entered his student's apartment, noticing a trail of blood leading up to the door, as if an injured or dead body had been dragged inside. On full alert, he went inside to see a pile of dead civilians in the corner, as well as tables turned over and the floor singed as if from a fire. Extending his senses, he could feel a very slight chakra signature, which seemed to be extinguishing itself. Naruto. A sense of urgency in his step, he followed the chakra signature to stumble upon a body lying on the floor bleeding out from multiple wounds. It was unmistakably Naruto's, and he was sporting a fatal wound on his chest, and an almost as serious one on his shoulder. He needed to be treated immediately, else, even the Kyuubi's healing might not be able to save his life. Who could have done this? Mere civilians could never have overpowered Naruto like this, especially if he used his clones. This is the work of a shinobi. I must report this to Hokage-sama. He created a shadow clone, leaving it to clean up behind the house, as he lifted the boy onto his back, setting out for the hospital. Taking to the rooftops, he arrived in under 5 minutes. Dropping his ward off at the ICU ward, and making use of his Koto Amatsukami to convince the doctor to look after him, he waited. Meanwhile, memories from his shadow clone popped into his head. His cage Bunshin had piled up all the civilians in the corner, and used a water jutsu to clean away all traces of blood. However, he started when he saw an animal mask, behind which were dead, soulless eyes staring up into his. Digging up the body from beneath the rubble from the partially collapsed roof, he found an Anbu operative burned completely to a crisp. Shisui barely knew Bear. He was a new recruit after all, and he had yet to be assigned to his squad for a mission. He seemed out of focus and frustrated for a couple days though, which showed in the Anbu training sessions, but he had given it no second thought. Now though, he could formulate a pretty good guess as to what was cooking in his head, and it wasn't pretty. Stashing the Anbu's corpse in a closet, the clone dispelled itself, leaving its memories for the original to peruse and think over. The Uchiha shook himself out of his thoughts as the nurse he had placed under a genjutsu as well approached him, telling him that his ward had bled out so much, he required a blood transfusion, and immediately at that, "Uchiha-san, I need to know what his blood group is so that we can arrange for a donation. He already has lost so much blood, that extracting some more to run a test would be highly dangerous." "I'm not sure. But my own blood group is O. That means that I can donate my blood to him, does it not?" "Yes it does. If you wish to go ahead with this, please follow me." An hour later, Naruto's condition had stabilized. Shisui had had to donate double the standard amount, his loss had been so substantial. With a respectable amount of blood back in the Jinchuriki's body, his tenant's efforts could finally be geared more towards healing and closing up his wounds. Soon, his cuts had closed up, with the help from several stitches not unwelcome. Hearing a rustling of sheets as Naruto moved around, Shisui stepped up to his bed. Naruto's eyes were blinking open, a flash of red flaring behind his eyelids, opening to reveal a tomoe in each one. The Sharingan. That's the end guys. If you enjoyed, then make sure to leave a comment. This is Chaos Shinobi signing off.